Thanks for tuning into the Monthly Social. The main show is coming up, but first we'd like to thank Greater Toronto's Music Mix Maverick, the pathradio.com radio station. Check it out for free all-day music. I'm also inviting you to guidoperino.com for product reviews, how-tos, and much more. Now, enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to a packed show on the Monthly Social for October. I am your host, Guido Perino, and on this month's show, I cover a review of Maisie Peters, Conan Gray, Amaare, and Sabrina Carpenter on tour in Toronto at the Budweiser Stage and Scotiabank Arena before I welcome our feature music guest, Canadian Rose Cora Perry, who delivers the truth untold with a smile, tall boots, and infectious candor. Then we shift to our first self-help segment with Shelley, Kenow on everything you want to know about individualized education plans and how they can benefit your child in school, at home, and in the future. After that, I take you down under as we chat with Baron Hansen in Nowra, Australia about his goal to have 1% of his hometown meditate to measure the overall benefit to the community as we talk Vedic meditation, the Maharishi effect, and hedonistic life choices. Plus, of course, some music from Rose, Cora Perry, and The Truth Untold. So let's go! But first, a word from one of our friends of the podcast, Johnny Prosciutto. Johnny Prosciutto, artisanal, Italian, homemade products. We make it like our grandfather, or as we say, Nonno. Naturally cured, old-fashioned, and delicious. Order online at johnnyprosciutto.com, and we deliver right to your front door, where the only thing left for you to do is enjoy it with your friends and family. That's johnnyprosciutto.com. You know, if you've been following me on Facebook, which is at the Monthly Social, or if you've been following me on Instagram, just Guido Perino, the Johnny Prosciutto deals lately have been wild. So back in August, we had a deal with Johnny Prosciutto where I think we were getting like 30% off. And then the most recent one, you got a free Bambino box with your order. So the fall deals that we've had with Johnny Prosciutto, our friends over in Montreal, have been awesome. So anyways, johnnyprosciutto.com. Stay tuned for more offers and deals just by listening to the podcast and giving us a follow. I wanted to cover off some music. Of course, I covered some concerts. Went back to the Budweiser stage in Toronto. Look, the traffic is still what it is. A little bit better than the summer with the IndyCar racing, I'll admit that. The parking, oh boy, do they ever nail you on the parking at the BMO field. $32 to park there just so you can walk across the street and then go to the venue, where you're going to drop another $100 if you want to have something to eat and drink, of course. But is what it is. The Budweiser stage, it's a cool little venue, partially outdoors, partially covered. I tend to try and sit in the partially covered areas, and enjoy it. I like being closer to the stage if I can. But I saw there Maisie Peters and Conan Gray. Now, Maisie Peters opens up the show. Fun little set that she put on. Really enjoyed her performance. Although, when it first started, and I don't know if this was, whoever was mixing or if it was the equipment at Budweiser Stage. I haven't figured that out yet. But the band was just so loud, it was drowning her out. There was just too much music for her voice in the beginning songs. And I know online I called out the Budweiser Stage, and I don't know if that influenced it changing. It got a little better in the songs afterwards. But the first few songs, I was just thinking to myself, oh, wow, it's breaking up bad. There's just too much bass, too much loudness from the band, and it was drowning her vocals out. I thought she was a great opener that complemented Conan Gray very well. And, you know, when you put two acts together as they tour, and I can actually see in the future where you know, Maisie might headline some shows or do some other venues on her own. She has a good following among fans, and like I said, the music was fun. Had some energy to it, had some laughs to it. There were cute moments, and she was overall a good performer. That, of course, led to Conan Gray. And the first thing when Conan comes out, he's wearing sort of this one-piece leather outfit. And he looks very tall on stage. He looks like he has, you know, commands some stage presence. The stage, the way it was set up with the you know, the tattered drapery and raised stage, etc. Anyways, he just immediately had stage presence, and just came across as larger than life. And he actually gave me Freddie Mercury vibes. You know, he just had this stage presence, and I don't know why. Maybe it was the outfit. It had a little bit of Freddie Mercury vibes, but even the performance and the emotion and the candor that he had just came across very, very strong. Now, there's a moment in his show where he gets emotional, so emotional that he can't sing the song, and he turns the microphone on to the crowd to allow the crowd to sing. Now, I don't know how I feel about that. I don't mind it when a performer, you know, engages the crowd and you become part of it. But this was almost a complete I can't sing this song moment that he had, and because the emotions overcame. And he did say in his opening that, you know, he might have you know, an outpouring of emotions at some point in the evening, and he certainly did. Now, I don't know what the cause of that was, or sorry, I'm not privileged to the inside track on why you know, that had happened to him. Maybe someday we'll have him on the show and we could ask. But I wasn't too keen on, hey, I'm going to let the crowd sing the whole song because I can't get through it. I mean, look, as a performer, I get you're going to have emotion, but you're performing. And so you know, you need to collect yourself and get back in the game, which he does later on in the show, folks. Don't get me wrong. You know, I really enjoyed Conan Gray. You know, got to stand up and sing and dance, and it was good. The emotional part of it was something that I thought maybe he could be better at if I was to ever criticize him or scrutinize him or offer opportunities for improvement in the future. Anyways, rock on, Conan, you were fantastic. Then next, a couple of nights later, I was able to visit the Air Canada Centre, where I saw Amaare and as the opening act, and then Sabrina Carpenter as the main feature. Now, I've also in past episodes talked about my experience with the Air Canada Centre, and if you've listened to that episode, that's back when I went to see Olivia Rodrigo. You know, we were standing in line. We were one of the early persons standing in line, and the doors would just not open. There was a long line of people, and when they say the doors are going to open at 6 o'clock, everybody expects the doors to open at 6 o'clock. Anyways, if you go back and listen to that show, you'll hear me rant a little bit about how poorly the Air Canada Centre staff behaved, even the security telling us, oh, if there's another door over on the other side, there's nobody there. If you guys go there, it's easier to get in. And some of us did that, and then that wasn't true. The lines were long, just as long or longer. So this time, we're standing in a different line for the Air Canada Centre. Sorry, I keep saying Air Canada Centre, and it's not. It's the Scotiabank Arena. I can't get over stop calling it the Air Canada Centre. I think because that's what it was born as when I first went there. So Scotiabank Arena. So the Scotiabank Arena went to a different area to stand in line, and different security guard at this comes out, and he says to a bunch of us in the crowd, hey, there's another door that has less people at it and you can get in sooner. And we all looked at each other and went, yeah, not doing that again. But sure enough, there was probably a couple hundred people that ran past us through the doors, up the escalator. You could see them in the window, up the escalator, ran across the hall. And I'm just thinking to myself, you suckers are going to get there and you're going to be in a long lineup, longer than where you were at here, because I've had that experience. What's sad is that the folks at Scotiabank Arena are still doing that. And that they're still, imposing that on fans. Anyways, the lineup I was in, it moved once the doors opened, and the doors were late opening again. But once the doors opened, I think at 6:05 or so, the line moved very quickly. The line moved so quickly. I know I was there with some family. They wanted to get in line for merch, and we were fortunate that once we got in, we were able to get in line for merch. We had merch in about 15 minutes that was purchased. And as we were exiting that, and I could see the other folks coming in, the merch line wrapped halfway around one of the arena floor. So if you were like in section, let's say 114, and that's where the merch was, the line for merch wrapped itself all the way halfway around to the other side of the arena. And they had multiple merch lines, but they were all like that. Now, as for the music, look, if you've listened to my past shows, you'll hear me say, go see the opening act. Don't miss out. Go and enjoy the opening act, catch them, because you never know that opening act. Like, look, we saw Chappelle Roan open for Olivia Rodrigo, and that was awesome because now she's number 2 on the charts with her song, and we witnessed this artist starting to break out, right? And we look back on that with some fond memories, but we had our butts in seats watching that opening act, and I've always been a huge supporter of the opening act. In this case, Amaare, look, there's fans there. They enjoyed her show. For me, it wasn't something that I enjoyed. There were moments that I enjoyed, in the music and the singing and the performance. The guitarist was out of this world, just shredding and playing fantastic. But the sound got overly distorted, probably worse than what I had seen at the Budweiser stage. It lost its essence of music at times. The act, and it just wasn't something that I could absorb. In fact, one of the kids who was with me said, hey, if you're going to get anything, if you're going for a walk, I'll go with you, because they just couldn't absorb it either. It made some other people uncomfortable. There was a lone dancer, and the interaction just made some people uncomfortable. Folks were going to see Sabrina Carpenter, and while there's some explicit lyrics that she employs, there was still a certain family element to the concert, with people kind of dressing up cute and all that sort of thing. And so I don't know in this scenario if Amaare was the right match to open for Sabrina Carpenter. Now, hey, who am I? Sabrina could say, well, that's who I picked, and hey, more power to you. But I don't think that, from what I saw, and there were fans cheering, but from what I saw, there was a lot more bums who had made it to their seats and decided to vacate those seats and go do something else during the opening act. And that tells me that, hey, I came, I gave this a chance, and they lost me on it. And I felt a little bit like that too. Just again, there was an uncomfortableness to it. The music didn't come across well. Far too much distortion and noise, and she kind of lost parts of the crowd. Although there was many times where the pockets of the crowd would cheer. But this is also a crowd, I just want to mention this, that was cheering lights coming on or turning off in anticipation of Sabrina. So it doesn't take a lot to get the crowd to cheer sometimes, okay? Look, if Amaare is your cup of tea of music, and I've listened to Amaare outside of that concert venue, and there was some songs where I can go, oh yeah, okay, cool, right? I would listen to that. In that setting, at that time, with that equipment, and in that scenario, it didn't work for me at all. Now, Sabrina, on the other hand, boy, what a show did she put on. It was, I said at one point, the show of shows. The set was fantastic. It had a retro feel to it throughout the whole show. She was using some simulated newscasts from the past, and the whole show actually told a story. And if you ever hear me talk about storytelling and albums, how when an artist puts an album together, how sometimes the album tells a story. Each song takes us through part of that story. Well, Sabrina's concert show, the whole concert tells a story. There's segments to it. There's pieces to it. There's a progression. The placement of the song seems strategic. But at the same time, while all that's happening, there's this whole complement of other things. She's got a set of dancers. She has, support dancers on stage. There's interaction. There's crowd interaction. There's lighting changes and lighting effects. And the music was strong. Her voice was strong. The music was strong. It allowed for moments to get up and dance. It allowed for moments of reflection. It allowed for just pure enjoyment. I thought maybe the whole show was a little short, but it was the short and sweet tour, so maybe that's what that was all about. There was only one annoyance I think I had, outside of the music that I've talked about, is, and this is awesome, by the way, like, it's great when you can go down and you're allowed to take pictures, you have the backdrop of the stage. I'm all for that. Fan experience, enjoy it. Let them do that. Let fans do that and enjoy it. But we lose those privileges as fans when someone makes it go too far. And there was this group of 3 girls there that they got to the point where they dominated this one little area where fans could go and take pictures, and there'd be the Sabrina Carpenter backdrop in the stage, etc. I kid you not. They must have posed for 2,000 photos. Leg up, leg down, hand behind hair, flicking the hair. At one point, one of them, I thought she was going to fall or elbow one of the gentlemen that was sitting in a seat close to this area. I was waiting for that to happen. But it was just a total disregard for anybody else as they sort of usurped this area just for themselves. Eventually, the security guard came and must have said something to them, and shortly after, they vacated. So that my only annoyance is that, like I always say, look, go and have fun at the show, be respectful, but go and have fun at the show, and let others have fun too. Anyways, that is my analysis here of those artists and those shows. I had a really good time. I'll try and post some pictures on the website, and again, if you follow me on Facebook at The Monthly Social, or if you follow me on Instagram at Guido Perino, you'll see some pictures and even some video. And there's one highlight video where Sabrina Carpenter, she does one cover song, I think, every show, and the cover song, of course, that she does in Canada is from Shania Twain. So check that out. You'll see the video, and give me a follow there. All right, look it. I've said I've got a just packed show. 3 different guests, 3 different topics. We're gonna kick things off with our music feature guest, and that's Rose Cora Perry. So let's get to that, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Monthly Social Canadian Music Spotlight. I'm your host, Guido Perino, welcoming from London, Ontario, front vocals and guitarist of her rock alternative band, The Truth Untold. We have Rose Cora Perry. Thank you for being here, Rose. How you doing?
Thank you for having me. Super excited to be here for sure. And thank you for not screwing up my name or the band's name, because that happens on a very regular basis. At this point, I'll answer to Rosa, the flamenco dancer. I'll answer to Cora. The band name is The Untold Truth. I mean, at this point, I just answered all of it. I'm like, sure, we're good.
It's funny you say that, because a part of me wants to say Rosa.
I know.
I go Rose, and then I have to stop, and it's Rose, but I want to say Rosa. Right?
I think it's because the A on the Cora, it's like people just feel that capacity and that urge to attach it to Rose, but I'm simply just a flower. I'm sorry to disappoint the world. I'm not Spanish. I'm Italian, and I'm a flower, and that's why I'm talking with my hands, obviously.
A rose by any other name
You
is
got it.
still
That's
a rose, right? No, I think maybe it's because I'm Italian. I want to end everything in an A or an O or
Right.
something like that.
Well,
So
you're also Canadian, so the A makes sense as well, right?
right? A?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I have to be so careful when we're touring the States because, I mean, not that I'm ashamed of being a Canadian by any stretch of the imagination, but of course, the moment that you drop any A's or a boots or whatever, the Americans are all over you. And so then it will happen invariably. I'll just be speaking to an American. They'll be like, hey! I'll be like, damn it, I gave myself away already.
See, I was just down in Florida and I had an Uber driver, and we were chatting the whole time. He was telling me a whole bunch of things, and he's like, "Where are you from?" And I say Canada. And as we're doing this whole conversation, towards the end, he's like, "I didn't know if you're from Canada." I said, "Why is that?" He said, "I haven't heard you say A."
Right.
I'm
that's
like,
exactly
"Oh, really?
right.
Eh?" And then he's like, "Oh, you just did it."
Exactly. At one point or another, it will just come out. It's kind of part of our natural dialect. We can't even help
Right?
it. And I mean, it's a very useful 2-letter word, truthfully. I mean, it can be used in so many circumstances. You're verifying, you're inquiring. I mean, there's a lot of umph that goes into those 2 letters.
A?
Exactly.
A?
Exactly. Depending on the intonation, it completely changes the meaning. Talking with my hands again.
we are teaching people things here today, Rose.
We are.
So look, I usually ask whoever the guest is something about where they're from and to tell us something, interesting. You're from London, Ontario. So, other than coming to see you play, what would we do? What would we go see in London? What's something to do?
Okay, so anybody who knows me, especially when we go to the States, knows that my 100% favorite anecdote about London, Ontario is Slippery the Seal. Do you know who Slippery the Seal is?
Slippery the Seal. No.
No? Okay, so Slippery the Seal, it was actually a sea lion, but they called him a seal for reasons that are unknown to me. Anyhow, I think this was back in like the 50s or 60s. Sorry, I'm bad with time periods. Anyways, it was back in the day. This very persistent little seal, he had apparently been coming from a zoo in California, and they brought him to London. Very dissatisfied with this life choice. He was not on board. So he took it upon himself to escape the encapture and swim down the Thames River and ended up all the way in Toledo, Ohio. So basically, he took one look at London and was like, I'm out of here. And then there was this whole international incident between Storybook Gardens, which is London, Ontario, where Slippery the Seal was supposed to be living, and the Toledo Zoo, because the Toledo Zoo's perspective was finders keepers, and they were making a killing off of this because this was an international incident, charging people, their right arm basically to see this infamous sea lion who had swam 700 kilometers just to get the hell out of London. So London eventually got Slippery back, begrudgingly. And he did live out his days there, and there's a monument to him. And anybody who's refuting any claims about this story, you can legitimately look up historical news articles and podcasts and videos dedicated. This is a true story, and it's perhaps the greatest thing that I ever learned about in my childhood. And it's so entrenched in London, Ontario history that my brother and I, when we were in elementary school, we actually had school assignments where we had to write poetry about the greatness of Slippery the Seal and his adventure. True story. So
this is amazing. I'm sitting here going, why don't I know about this already? Because I know a whole bunch of weird and different things, and I don't know about Slippery the Seal. So as you're saying this, I got to go look this up now. Not that I don't believe you. I just want to know more. Like, I'm like, was he more fit after he did this, long 800-kilometer trek, like down the river and stuff? And was he as popular in London after? Like, Oh,
yeah, for sure. I mean, like, there was a parade when he had his homecoming. But I mean, the thing that's so amazing about this sea lion is, I mean, if this was a person, you would give him a high five for the level of persistence in terms of like the whole escape route, because they tried to tranquilize him multiple times. It didn't take. It's like, screw that, man. I'm just doing whatever the heck I want, swimming around. There's like all these various rescue teams trying to go out and capture them. He kept evading him. And then there's this famous part of the story where at one point he was like sunbathing, almost basking in his glory of evading authorities. It is such a great story. It really is. And I tell this to anybody who will listen.
The only thing that could have made him better was if he also played guitar or music.
100%. Yeah.
Right?
For sure.
Like if he was a rock and roll seal of some kind who did this, then I'd be like, wow, man, that's even more wild, right? So, okay. So Slippery the Seal, we got to look that up. Interesting fact about London, Ontario. So London, halfway point roughly between Windsor, Ontario and Toronto. I lived in Windsor, great music town. Detroit's right across the river. Lots of things going on there music wise. Now, of course, Toronto, classic venues, El Macambo, the Horseshoe Tavern, Danforth Music Hall, Lee's Palace, the Phoenix. It goes on and on, right? As a musician, did you find yourself going more towards the Windsor, Detroit, or more towards Toronto, or something else?
See, and that's a great question. And interestingly, my career has taken me primarily to the US. Americans love me and I love them. It's a reciprocal love fest, truthfully. And I mean, the radio play that we get consistently for the singles that we release with The Truth Untold, by and large, it's American stations and like legit FM stations. So I mean, I think it goes without saying in any business, you're going to go to where your market is. That's not to say that we neglect our home country. Obviously, we love Canada and we're happy to play Canadian events and Canadian venues too. My bassist and drummer are actually from Hamilton, which has got a great music scene too. So we love to be able to support that local scene as well. I've had great events in Windsor and I've had great events in Toronto. I mean, last year, one of the highlights of our touring season, we got to kick off our tour by doing a showcase at Indie Night in Canada at the Elmo. So that was pretty sweet. And then I've got friends in Windsor that actually put on this really, really awesome mental health awareness and suicide awareness fundraiser on a fairly regular basis called Canerfest out of Windsor. So definitely have connections all across Southwestern Ontario and love playing in our own backyard. But to be honest, out of all of our tour dates this year, and we probably had maybe about 12, 15 major dates, something along those lines. All of them except for 2 were in the States. So all of them. And I mean, as I said, you go to where your market is. And if that's where we're getting booked and that's where people are really digging what we're doing, I mean, that's where we're going to play.
So did you just happen to go to the States and you kind of just got into a vibe there and people started recognizing you, or did something else happen to make that happen, or?
I mean, it's honestly just being soliciting for different events. So we have events that we solicit for all across the place, but the majority of the places that end up booking us are American venues. So as I said, you go to where your market is.
That's right on. We're invading the United States. Rose
exactly. Canadian invasion, but a peaceful invasion because we're not angry or aggressive like that. We're just there to rock.
Rock and roll. All right.
You got it.
So look, before you start doing your music thing, before you start doing that, you were awarded the most photogenic and best smile at the age of 16.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Now you're going to make me
still
blush.
Smiling though. So look at it's there, right? So how does this come to be? What's going on there?
Number one, thank my parents for investing in orthodontic work because I very much needed it. Number two, my mother, if I could even be one iota as beautiful as her, I would be considered a very, very lucky woman. And so she is a goddess, and I'm so thankful to have inherited at least part of her looks. And she did some modeling in her youth as well. She actually is a professional fitness trainer, and she did bodybuilding. My God, she's got a hell of a physique, and yeah, she could probably kick most people's butts. Even as a senior at this point, I love and adore both my parents, but my mom is a goddess for sure. And so because, she kind of had some fun doing that stuff when she was younger, she thought that I might have some fun doing it too. And I'm sure you can see my extensive amount of hair. I actually primarily did hair modeling when I was younger. because hairstylists love working with this massive mop on my head because they could style it in whatever capacity they wanted. There was so much to work with, and it's very, very friendly when it comes to different crazy, vibrant hair colors. So I had my hair all different colors, and I'm far too short to do runway modeling seriously because I'm only 5'4.5". Most runway models have to be at least 5'7". So I couldn't quite meet the mark with that, but I did a lot of hair modeling, which in turn led to photography modeling because people found that I was very photogenic and kind of had a presence. And I mean, that's all kind of tied into my musicianship too, because a huge part of being a musician and being part of branding, your image and stuff is having that sort of visual identity. And I have so much fun planning photo shoots and coming up with elaborate ideas for music videos and stuff that I kind of consider it all an extension of my artistry. So I don't know, it's just all kind of been part of the journey, I guess, to get to where I am.
So you found your smile and you've kept your smile. I hope that you continue to do that. And 5'4", you say 5'4", but I'm thinking, I look at the pictures of you, and when you got your guitar, you don't maybe it's the guitar. It makes you look tall.
It's also, I got my bitch boots on too.
The boots.
I wear these old wrangled up 20-year-old army boots I got at a thrift store. They add at least 4 or 5 inches to me. But I mean, I think it's about the presence too. So something that's important to me as a female and a female musician is that I think that it's important for women to exude confidence and, to feel good about themselves. And I mean, they're not doing it for validation. They're doing it for themselves. And I mean, nothing about my image has ever been about, hey, I'm trying to be sexy, look at me. It's just been about, this is who I am, unapologetic, and I'm confident, and I damn well want to rock. So you either dig it or you don't, right? And I mean, if you don't, that's cool too. To each their own. Everybody's got their own stuff that they're into, but I don't believe in flaunting and that kind of thing. I'd rather leave something up to the imagination. So I go for the more badass, I guess, Joan Jett aesthetic.
Oh, that's it, Joan Jett. You had me. That's it. I'm good. Joan Jett.
Yeah. I mean, there are worse people to idolize and look up to. I mean, she was such a pioneer in her craft, and some of the crazy stories that she went through back in the 70s when, I mean, sexism was so much more alive and real. Not to say that I don't still experience my own moments, and I know other female musicians do too, and that's still a reality, but some of the things that she went through in her early years are pretty tragic. And I mean, I have so much respect and love for any woman who is a pioneer and trailblazer like that, for sure.
I just saw Joan Jett a couple of months ago at the Budweiser stage in Toronto.
Nice.
And she wasn't the final act.
Right.
But I talk about this on one of my earlier episodes. She could have been the final act.
Right.
That was just
it for you.
Like the stage presence that she had, right? And the way that she played her songs, and and because I like Joan Jett, having listened to the albums and things, I was like, she sounds like the albums,
right? And
just the energy she still has and the presence that she brings,
right?
And anyways, I had my girls there and stuff about it too, so it was kind of neat, just that all that stuff sort of happening. And when my girls can see a woman musician and how they can elevate themselves and be in that position, right? It's always important for me too. Do you find that as a woman, and I've had this conversation with different genres, like I've had guests who play country music or pop music, and similar but different answers sometimes. So I'm just curious,
right?
In your genre of music, as a woman,
right,
has it been harder?
Oh God, yeah. Rock music is not a woman's playing field whatsoever. And there are still assumptions that I'm just the candy, like the arm candy for the dudes who are in the band. Like I remember legitimately, it was probably only about a year ago, we were playing in Toronto, hilariously. And after the set, the person who had approached me did not see our set. They had only heard it, I guess, in earshot or whatever. They didn't see me on stage. And so I was packing up my patch cables and putting away my guitar. And this dude comes up to me. He's like, wow, that's so sweet of you to be packing up after your boyfriend's show. And I'm like, yeah, I'm the front woman of the band, dude. I write the songs. That was a pickup line. You totally epically failed there.
Wow.
And I mean, It's fine. I get it. There's these assumptions that if a woman is going to be in a rock band, oftentimes it's just there for aesthetic. She doesn't actually have any talent. And I mean, the same thing has happened with my bassist as well, where, backlines being provided and people assume that we don't know how to turn on our amplifiers or use a microphone. And I mean, at a certain point, you just laugh it off. Like, I'm not going to get into a pissing contest with anybody. If those are the views that you maintain, hey, to each their own. I mean, that's kind of your own life journey to work through that. And I'm sure at some point it's going to have to come to a head and you're going to have to face some of these biases that you might hold. But I mean, I make no judgments to other people. Maybe they have reasons for having those views. Who knows? Regardless, I just kind of live by the antidote that I learned a long time ago from one of my childhood idols, also from London, Ontario, Nicole Hughes of Scratching Post. Just rock past it. That's all.
Just rock past it. Yeah, I like it.
Just rock past it. That's all that matters.
So look at sticking with the guitar and your music and overcoming and learning. You are self-taught at guitar, I understand. And this around 2002, you start doing this, I think. And like, I'm just thinking, the internet really, might have just started putting out some, chords and lyrics and it was, just starting to become like a resource in terms of getting that type of information, music sheets, right? How did you go about teaching yourself in 2000? And people listening today are going to be like, 2002, that stuff wasn't around. And it's right, like, I know. Oh man, it was just starting out. So how did you go about it?
So that's actually an interesting question. So what I will say is that I had a classical upbringing as a vocalist, so I had that to leverage. So I understand music, I understand chords, I understand, the bass clef, the treble clef, all of kind of the technical capacity of that stuff, because I studied classical voice for about 14 years. So I did have that foundation already, and I did theory rudiments as well through the Royal Conservatory. But I am a 100% self-taught guitarist. And actually, given that era that I was being raised in, again, interesting fact, I remember at one point I did try to solicit to find a guitar teacher to teach me. And I was very, very, very adamant that I did not want to be an Angus. I wanted to be a Malcolm, as in AC/DC. I only wanted to learn rhythm guitar. And the couple of guitar teachers that I did encounter all wanted to teach me how to shred. And I'm like, but listen, I'm not interested in shredding. I have so much respect in the world for an amazing lead guitarist, but I knew in my heart and soul that my primary instrument will always be my voice. And I only wanted to learn to play guitar to write songs, to accompany my voice, because I consider that my gift. I write beautiful melodies, and I'm very, very thankful for having this capacity to sing and, and do all the things that I can vocally. So I just wanted to learn guitar to be a songwriter. Nobody seemed to understand this concept, and they wouldn't take me seriously. They're like, no, we want you to work on your arpeggios and stuff. I'm like, I don't care about that stuff. I really don't. So inevitably, I found myself having to teach myself how to play guitar. And so I don't know the name of any of the chords that I'm playing. And I know that that's going to sound bizarre because I've been playing guitar now for quite some time, but I actually invented my own tablature. I know how to read it. I can explain it to other people logically so that it makes sense to them, but it's my own way of writing songs so that I know where my chord progressions are. But like one of my chords is going to be like a 2-7-9, and people would be like, what the hell is a 2-7-9? I know what it means, but unless I explained it, nobody else would understand what it's meaning or know how to read any of my song sheets. So, I mean, I guess necessity is the mother of invention. And so I did what I had to do. And that's how I learned how to become a songwriter. And so the very first song that I actually successfully learned to play on guitar and sing, because that was kind of the biggest struggle that I had, understanding rhythmically how to do something that contrasted with the rhythm and the timing of the vocals, was Say It Ain't So by Weezer, because it's got kind of like the ska beat to it, but then the vocals are doing a really, really straight kind of temper. So I was trying to do that contrasting part together, and I remember being so happy and satisfied when I finally nailed it. So that was probably one of the only songs that I actually learned by another artist, because then I spent the next 6 months on my journey of learning how to play guitar, writing my very first rock album.
So let's talk about it. So phenomenal story about, teaching and creating your own chord language. It's kind of like artificial intelligence where, the the computers are now talking to each other, making up their own language, and you know, because they don't want to use the language we program them with. So
Right.
you were way ahead of artificial intelligence.
I was ahead of AI.
You were ahead of AI.
You said it.
When it comes to chords and music, you were the pioneer there. So, but you start doing your own thing. You start writing, you know, some of your own songs, but not just writing your own songs. You're eventually like winning awards and you know, you're climbing some charts. Like, does this happen in retrospect? Does this happen quickly for you, or you know, was it still kind of like, you know, yeah, something's good might happen, gonna happen, is happening, you know?
I mean, I'd say yes and no. I mean, the first single off of my first album got mainstream radio play, which was kind of cool. That band didn't end up, you know, going on to have much greater success beyond that. Like we had a decent local following and whatnot, but the reality is we were all kids, we were teenagers, so everybody wanted to go to university, and I wanted to pursue the rock star dream. Now, I did get a post-secondary education, all 6 years of it, so I did end up doing the smart conservative thing, and I'm thankful for that. But everybody else kind of didn't really want to stick with the music thing, and that's fine. So then I formed my second band, which ended up trumping the success of the first one. We got picked up by a subsidiary of a major label. We're touring all over the place. You know, we're selling out consistently as kind of the top independent artist for that band. And unfortunately, the tragic story is that it fell apart because my band members were more interested in the sex, drugs, and rock and roll as opposed to just the rock and roll. Right. So then I became a solo artist. Released a couple solo albums, tried to do the whole singer-songwriter thing, but as a former frontwoman of obnoxious rock bands, it clearly didn't take. I was not satisfied touring around playing coffee shops with an acoustic guitar. And I have absolutely incredible respect for anybody who can do that stripped down, kind of really vulnerable, raw, emotional music, because it's beautiful and I absolutely love it. Yeah. But it's just not me. I can write that stuff, but it doesn't feel authentic to where I want to be with my career. So then fast forward to 2016, 2017, I just released my second solo album. I was getting great success. Away I Go is this really, really pretty pop ballad. It's probably one of my most successful songs ever. As a singer-songwriter, kind of doing like the poppier, nicer stuff, it was getting played on like stations with Adele. And so I'm like, oh my God, this is insane. But then I got reeled back into forming a rock and roll band because I met some other members and they reignited my love of distortion. I'm like, damn it. Yep. I can't deny it. I really love wailing on electric guitar. And so then what ended up happening is 2019, I took some of my solo songs that were previously released and I rearranged them and made them heavier and more performance oriented. And then, of course, COVID happened. Right. All the success that I'd built up with The Truth Untold, like we were doing some awesome stuff. We played the Whiskey a Go-Go. We played Summer NAMM in Nashville. Like we were playing some awesome events and it was so, so exciting. And, you know, it felt like we were making traction. Then COVID happened. The world ended. Took a couple of years off to reconvene, and then came back in 2022 with Not My Time, which is actually the very first song I ever wrote just for The Truth Untold, followed up by The Cure, which we just released a couple of months ago. And both have been wildly successful on radio, probably more successful than anything I've released in the past. So I wouldn't say that success has ever been overnight for anybody. I think that there's always a journey and there's always a backstory. But what I will say is that I'm very, very thankful that my music, as it's kind of evolved throughout my career and I've gone in different directions, is resonating with people, because that's really all you can hope for as a musician, that you write something that, you know, it reaches somebody else in their heart or their mind or their soul, and it makes a difference for them. So I'm thankful for that. And I'm thankful for all the people who have continued to support me on my journey of different experiments and going in different directions, and for better, for worse. And yeah, it's been a hell of a thing so far.
It's interesting. Like when you tell that and you think about it and you go, yeah, like you really condense a lot of the things that happened over those series of years, right? Sure. In your music journey. But that's a lot of unloading and loading of amplifiers and guitars and shows and you know, conversations and people and places and traveling, right? Sometimes we think as audience members, we think, oh yeah, well, they're just going to show up and they're going to play, right? And you know, here they are. but then all the stuff in between that happens, right? And that's a lot of years. And to come out of so many weird things happened with the pandemic, right? So especially with artists, like the whole, well, we're gonna, record tracks here, send them there, do that. And some came out, just the way they always were. And some came out a little lighter and some came out a little heavier.
Right.
But it sounds like you guys, like you came out and you came out with more hits, right? You're getting a lot of traction. We're going to talk about that, the song and the band, as we continue to go here. Earlier, we talked about, hey, you've done a lot in the US. You just mentioned the whiskey, of course, and NAMM, right? And Nashville. You've been New York, Chicago, New Jersey, Wisconsin, Carolina. You've done the road, right? You were an honorary artist at the Grammy Awards.
I was, yeah.
Right. Does that change your view of Canada, or is it different for you to play in Canada than it is in the United States?
It is, but it doesn't change my view of Canada. I think that Canada has a very niche music scene, and I think that any Canadian artist, I hate to say it, but when they've tried to kind of reach international acclaim, they've inevitably found themselves vacating to the States. I mean, Celine Dion at one point did live in Canada.
Right.
So did Alanis Morissette. Right. just throwing that out there. Yeah. They do not anymore. Alanis is in LA, Celine Dion is in Vegas, and they're kind of honorary Americans at this point. So as much as I support the Canadian music scene, I oftentimes have found, and other artists will tell you this too, so I'm not trying to poo-poo on our nation, but oftentimes it feels like Canada's a little bit behind in the trend, and until something is kind of deemed cool elsewhere, Canada doesn't really get on board. But the opposite is also true, because there are some bands that are so diehard Canadiana that they almost get stuck in only having a claim in Canada, and the rest of the world doesn't even know that they exist. And that's also a shame too. So I kind of feel like it's a catch-22. You can be very, very successful and very, very popular, but be enclosed in that space and never get out internationally. Or you can try and venture out internationally and hope that Canada will be like, all right, I guess you're okay. We'll let you back in and we'll acknowledge you're a Canadian. I think it can go either way. And as I said, I'm very appreciative. I have amazing support here in Canada from so many incredible people too. Some of my best friends in the entire world I met from playing gigs locally, and they are dear friends of mine now for 20 years plus, which is amazing. You could never replace that with anything. But in terms of just kind of ongoing general interest in what I do for whatever reason, it's been the States. And so, as I said, I love touring the States. It's always lots of fun, and we have a great time and great reception there.
You're just on loan. I just want you to know that you're just on loan to them.
Just on loan. All right, Canada. Just on loan. Book me more then.
Look, you talked about the Truth Untold, the band, your current band. Yeah. What is the Truth Untold?
Oh, what does the name mean? Is that what you're getting at? So if you want to do a deep dive on the internet and learn a little bit about me, you can look up the lyrics to a song that I wrote as a solo artist called Curtains Close. And essentially the song is about when you're, and I said about, didn't I? Oh my gosh, I sounded so Canadian there. The song is about when you're an adult learning that a lot of the truths you believed to be true as a child are fictitious or they're fantasies, and you have to come to grips with a lot of realities that maybe ignorance would have been more blissful, so to speak. So you have to face some truths that you didn't necessarily want to have told to you. That's the meaning of the band name, and I just thought it was kind of a poignant statement on society in general, because oftentimes we feel that way as adults. We kind of would prefer to have the wool pulled over our eyes and living in this ignorant state, but it's also better to kind of face reality head on and be honest and upfront with people. So they might not be truths that you want to have told, but they are important truths to acknowledge.
Now, I know you've got some roots in the song that came out of this, but also the temperature of the time that you named this band, the temperature of what's going on globally. Does that influence this?
Oh, 100%. Yes. Yeah. Yes. And I mean, you could say that about any of my band names. There's always kind of an acknowledgement of what's going on socially and politically and just the general consensus of the world. And I don't think that that's by accident, so to speak.
In true rock rebellion, I suppose. You're a three-piece band, right?
Yes.
And what makes that trio work for the Truth Untold?
So I think what makes it work is that we're unassuming, especially as a female-fronted trio, because you don't see those very frequently. And so people often associate trios as not necessarily having the fullness or the depth as a quartet, because the quartet is kind of more the standard rock and roll personification, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But then we go up there and usually the response is, wow, you're really loud. We're like, yeah, we know. And I mean, we like that. We kind of like being unassuming and people being unexpected, having kind of that reaction to us in a positive way. And we like having that stripped down, raw, kind of to the point rock and roll experience. I mean, it's no different than Nirvana or Silverchair or some of my favorite bands from that 90s. It's just really, really stripped down, raw, authentic, in your face.
Does the trio make you play a certain style just because it is the trio, or does it matter?
It puts more pressure on me because my former bands, I was always the rhythm guitarist and I was the secondary guitarist. This is the first time in my entire career I've ever fronted a band where I'm the lone guitarist. So definitely a lot more pressure on me, to be honest. And when I initially had formed the band, I did think about having a quartet, but it ended up going in the trio direction. And I think it's made me more confident in what I do. And I mean, still, I'm not a lead guitarist. I am unabashedly a rhythm guitarist, and I have no problem saying that. I do what I do. I chug, I paw mute. It ain't fancy, but it works. But I like having that stripped down kind of element and just, punching people in the face with it.
It sounds so punk, punching people in the face.
Okay, but that's the reality, though. That's my roots. My roots were as a punk. I mean, I spent the better part of my youth at Call the Office, amazing historical landmark in London, Ontario. Please check it out. Incredible history at that venue. Going and sneaking into tons of punk rock shows as an underager with a really bad fake ID, and stage diving and going in the mosh pit. So what do you expect? I mean, that never left. That attitude is entrenched in my blood and my DNA.
That's fun. Well, I'm just thinking mosh pits. It's been a while since I've seen the mosh pit. Rose, what would you say I think is your greatest challenge so far as an artist?
Oh God, that is such a loaded question.
Well, you know what? In fairness, so we talked about gender, right?
Yep.
We talked about culture. We talked about playing in different countries. We talked about perceptions. Yep. There's just so many different avenues, but if you had to pick one of those things, or maybe something else, and I ask this because even from the woman perspective, right? Like if we have young artists listening,
for sure,
is that something that they can relate to? Is that something that they can expect? Is that something they might have to overcome? Right?
I think it's probably, I mean, this is going to sound so cliche and then so much like I'm talking about a 9-to-5 job, but it's probably work-life balance, because the reality is that I would love to give every iota of myself to just being a musician constantly all the time. But then I also need to sleep at points. And I need to, have a reprieve and actually have a life and have some time to snuggle with my kitties. I mean, those are all, and eat and buy groceries and do regular day-to-day things too. And I mean, at times it can be overwhelming. I think that the expectations for all of the managerial pressures and the booking pressures and the publicity and being on social media and all that stuff, I mean, it's pretty intense. I mean, I remember, and again, I'm totally going to date myself, but decades ago, to promote a show, you maybe went downtown, put out 50 flyers on street posts, the place would be sold out. Now you're competing with everyone across the world on a platform with very limited ad space and hoping that people are going to come to a concert. So there's this perception very much that the World Wide Web has helped the music scene. I would argue the opposite, not to sound like a Luddite. Yeah. I know we already made fun of me earlier for using a BlackBerry and a computer from 2010, but the reality is that I don't think technology has empowered the independent artist. I think it's actually made it more fiercely competitive and harder, because now you're competing on a global platform trying to get people's attention, whereas that whole localization has completely gone away. And so oftentimes there's this perception that people won't go to shows unless they've heard of you. Whereas I can tell you, when I was a kid, I didn't care who the heck the band was playing. I was just there for the rock and roll experience. There's so many bands that I discovered that I had no idea who they were, never heard their music before. But I was up there, I was in the pit, I was skanking, I was doing all that cool stuff, just crowd surfing, enjoying the rock and roll experience. And I came home with so many CDs and so much merch of these bands I never would have discovered otherwise. So I didn't care about the perception about them already being popular or already being, acquainted with their music. It was about that atmosphere and that connection with other people, because that was also a very different perception about going to rock concerts that I think has changed, particularly with COVID, that live music and live streaming is somehow the same through a computer as opposed to being there in person. I would strongly argue it's not. I mean, to me, whether I'm up on the stage or a member in the crowd, I want to be able to feel the energy and the emotion between the audience and the musician on stage. You can't experience that in a sterile atmosphere where you're talking or expressing yourself through a screen. That is a human experience. It needs to be experienced in person. You feel a connection. It is a very, very real thing. And it is so absolutely incredibly magical as a performer to see people in the crowd singing along to your lyrics. You're like, oh my God, those are my words. Or to even be in a crowd and be among a sea of people, they're complete strangers, and all of you are connected in this beautiful moment, singing along to the person on stage. Like, that is, it's irreplaceable. You cannot replace that with a screen experience. And anybody who argues otherwise, I challenge you.
You are challenged by Rose and her punk rock. Listen, you make some really cool points. Like, music may have become more accessible for the artist, like for people of the artist, but it holds true for everybody, right? So every artist's music is now more accessible on all these different platforms, but finding that artist is more challenging, because the pond got bigger, right?
Exactly.
And you're right. Yeah. Like, we would walk down the street. I used to like the little posters, right? You'd see, we'd walk downtown. You'd see,
cool.
Oh yeah, so and so is gonna, and even now, like some of the older bands, you see they still have their posters,
They're still old school. Yep.
Right, of where they were playing. You made me think of, and we were talking about Windsor earlier, and you keep saying, I'm dating myself, and I'm thinking, I don't know, Rose, I think I'm older than you, but so Windsor, there used to be a place called California's. I don't know if you remember California's.
I don't remember.
So it was this, it was a bar of some kind that it must have held, I don't remember, a few hundred people. Right. And there were bands there like every weekend, and it was the place to go, right? Like, the bands would come in, you'd see all sorts of acts. I remember, but it wasn't just like local bands. I remember going to see Alana Miles there, and yeah, right. And doing the smaller, bar tours and stuff. And that live experience, it's just something, it was something different, right? And yes. You're right. The streaming thing, it's nice because it's accessible, but the experience, isn't quite the same. And then the other thought you made me think of was, and I've talked about this on other shows, is opening acts. Right. If I buy a ticket to see Alanis Morissette, which I did, right? And I know Alanis doesn't come on till 9:00 or 9:30 or something, right? I am there, and the doors open at 6. I'm there at 5:30. I want to be there, and I want to see the opening act, because
but you're old.
I love the opening acts, right? Like, I have seen these opening acts, and I end up buying their music. Because I'm like, man, I never heard of them, but they're so good, right? Right. And then you find out, and I say this to my kids, right? I say, you know what? That opening act, because they're new, someday they will not be the opening act. And those people who are not there to see them right now are going to say, oh, I wish I could have seen this person play or this band play, right? So I would say, go support everybody from the first act right to the end, because when you're there and you have that live music and you experience that, it's like no other feeling. It's its own unique feeling. So that's a really long way for me to say I agree with everything that you just said. And throughout my own little dating myself things of talking about California's is no longer there. I think it closed down many years ago. But there was California's, there was Joker's, there was a bunch of really cool places that we would go get our live music fix at. So, look, I keep coming back to one thing, and I'm sorry because I keep throwing the America, Canada thing back and forth, right?
People are going to think I have anti-Canadian sentiments, and I truly don't. I love my country. I'm a damn proud Canadian for sure.
Exactly, right? Like
I love maple syrup. I don't know what further proof you need. I'll put it on everything.
Wait, like, are there different kinds of maple syrup you like, though, or?
Just like the authentic, dark amber, grade A, obviously.
Tapping your own tree, like that's good.
I don't know if I'm going that far. I'm salvaging my own sap.
I want to see.
It's really sad. People are going to think that I'm nuts.
You're going to have to come out in one of your shows wearing a plaid shirt, carrying the 100%. Guitar over like your shoulder, like a true axe or something.
Yeah. And say, oh yeah, for sure.
Guido.
Lumberjacking it up.
So listen, you are a proud Canadian. You've performed the Canadian national anthem a few times now at events. And, we've seen creative versions from some artists when they do that. How do you approach doing our anthem?
I do the bilingual version, believe it or not. Wow. So I do the second verse half in French, and then I do the rest in English. And je parle un petit peu français, but my accent's pretty terrible. My best friend in the entire universe, however, is French. She's from Montreal, so she will correct me, and I'm sure I'll probably get a lecture if she sees this. She'll be like, oh, très mauvais. But yes, if I do perform it, and I've been honored to been asked a couple of times. It's funny actually that you mentioned that people have different artistic interpretations, because my favorite version that I've ever seen performed was when Celine Dion did it, and she screwed up the lyrics, but damn, her voice is so good, I didn't even care. Like, it's Celine Dion. She's a national treasure. She can sing whatever the hell she wants.
Forgivable.
It's fine. It's forgivable.
Do you add a little distortion when you do it, or?
No, I sing it clean. So I am classically trained, and I mean, I can add grit if I want to what I'm doing vocally, but I can also sing very, very pretty and operatically because, as I said, I went through the Royal Conservatory. And I mean, Believe it or not, despite the fact that I've had this illustrious career as a rock and roll musician, the goal as a child, when I was 4 years old and I initially started performing and taking voice lessons, is that I wanted to be on Broadway. My inspiration growing up was Sarah Brightman, the original Christine of Andrew Lloyd Webber's Phantom of the Opera. And I wanted to be her. That's who I looked up to and I idolized. And then the very first concert I ever saw in my entire life was Celtic harpist singer Lorena McKennitt from Stratford, Ontario. And she's got a voice that sounds like it's a gift from the heavens. I mean, she sounds like an angel. And both of them I listened to growing up, and that's who I wanted to be. That's who I wanted to emulate. So the fact that rock inevitably found itself, probably because I'm slightly obnoxious, you may or may not have noticed, that was just kind of a fluke, and it was absolutely not part of the life plan.
That's okay. We all have secrets, Rose.
It's not a secret. It's just, I mean, I was a teenager that definitely had some struggles, I'll be honest and open about that. I had some mental health struggles, and I struggled a lot with depression and self-esteem issues. And I think rock, the reason that it ended up appealing to me is because I just found it to be so emotive and cathartic and real. And this is no dig at classical, because I love classical and I love the regimentedness about it and the dynamics and how everything is just so precise and pure. But the thing to me for it that was lacking was that rawness and that realness and that emotion. And so when I started getting into rock, and then I eventually started writing rock, I noticed that my own personal struggles that I was writing with, people would come up to me and be like, wow, I can totally relate to you. And it just, I could the significance of that, I couldn't quite even understand until I really started getting into the genre and understanding the differences. And I mean, again, no dig against classical music. I mean, you got to be a hell of a musician to be able to pull that stuff off. But I couldn't feel myself in that music in the same way as I could with rock. Rock just became such a authentic way of expressing myself. And then learning that it really made a difference with other people's lives too. It's like, well, this is it. This is where I belong. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I mean, absolutely, to my mother's disdain at the time. She's like, "You're going to ruin your beautiful voice." Oh my God, what are you doing? I'm sorry, Mom. I haven't ruined my voice. I still sing pretty, but I just love to have distortion behind me and loud drums and all that good stuff.
That's important though. So you found your connection in rock music. You found your emotion. You found a way to express yourself and to be able to do that. And it's interesting because you talked about, emotions, mental health, etc. And, I don't want to sound like I used to walk, to school uphill both ways in the snow kind of guy here, right?
But you're Canadian and you obviously did.
I did. I really actually did, right? I really did. But that aside, the way that I felt that I consumed music as a teenager is a little different than I think how I see them consume it today.
Right.
Because I didn't have all these different avenues. I would go down to, Sam the Record Man or whatever our local store was, buy some tapes, go home, open them up, find myself in these lyrics as I read the sleeves and connected with the pictures the limited pictures that I saw, or hope that I would get a magazine or something. And so whatever our teenage emotions were back then, that's what we did. Now, I don't know today, because everything's online and everything comes faster to everybody, and talking about mental health, it's gotten as a bigger thing for us to look at and help others with, right? So it's just the amount of information. It's just a different way to consume it. So I think, rock and roll, hey man, you found it back then, and that was the thing that worked. And maybe someone else would find it in a different genre, right? I don't know, but I sort of went the same way. My first sort of thing was yeah, man, rock and roll. And I felt I felt powerful, so.
No, but it's true. And I mean, I don't think that there's any right or wrong genre in music. I think it's just what resonates with you. Right. And I mean, for me, it was rock because it was exactly as you said, powerful, angsty. It was a way that I could express myself and everything that I was feeling in a safe way. And I say that because this is really important. So I struggled, as I said, throughout my youth with some really, really hairy thoughts at times, things that make me really sad to think back upon, that I was just in such a bad state of affairs. But I never turned to drugs. I never turned to alcohol. I never went down in the depths and really found myself consumed by substances. And unfortunately, I've lost people in my own life, friends and family, from those very vices. And so that's always really been a sore point for me when I've seen so many wonderful people just have their lives taken away because of that, because they don't know how to cope. And I mean, I don't blame them. Not knowing how to cope, that's kind of a human experience. None of us can cope perfectly. I mean, when the hits the fan, I mean, it doesn't matter how much mental stamina you have. There's only so much any individual can take, irrespective of what their upbringing and their beliefs are. And we all have breaking points and we all have our own burdens to bear. But I really feel like it's far too glorified in rock and roll, and it's too accessible how much substances are kind of part of our culture, that it just becomes an easy fix and an easy Band-Aid solution. And then people ultimately don't deal with their problems, and then they just compound and compound and compound to the point where you're past the point of no return. So music for me was my way of getting through all of that. I'm not saying that's perfect. I'm not saying that I don't still have, sad moments at times. Of course. I mean, I'm human. We all have those, good times and bad times and moments of personal reflection and all those things. But I can honestly say that turning to music legitimately saved my life, and it made a huge difference for me. So if a little piece of my heart that I put into my lyrics can do that for somebody else, well then, mission accomplished. That's what I've been put here to do.
Yeah. I was just going to say, you know what? And as you're going through that journey and you're able to create, then others can absorb and be on that journey with you, and you can pull them through from wherever they're coming from. You know what? And I was just thinking, I made a little note as we were talking because I haven't done it in a while. What I'll do is I'll throw in the show notes some of the, you know, crisis hotlines and a few other things like that, just so that we can, you know, if folks are listening and, you know, connecting with the message or whatever and wondering about themselves, that they'll have access to some numbers that they can call. And by all means, you know, talk. It's important to talk.
100%. And I mean, it's really important that we even have such resources available because it wasn't always that way. I mean, mental health and mental illness was long seen as not a serious crisis and not nearly as detrimental as a physical ailment. So I'm very thankful with my own life experiences, as well as for those that I love and just the world in general, that we have resources available now for people so that they know that it's safe and it's okay to be honest and it's okay to have scary thoughts sometimes. Just know that you've got ways to cope and hopefully help you get through it.
It's incredible. We have come a long way, a really long way.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. It's we're thinking back again as we date ourselves. Look, just changing our mood a little bit and changing the topic as we continue to have our conversation here. The music world is a very, I've learned in doing this now for 5 years and talking to a lot of musicians, it's a very small world.
Right.
It used to be so much bigger to me before, but it's a very small world. I understand that you were photographed by Lisa S. Johnson.
Yes, yes, I was.
She is a photography artist with 2 amazing books, 108 Rockstars Guitars and Immortal Axes. She's been a guest here on the Monthly Social. I've had the pleasure of hanging out with her in Toronto and you know, just chilling and having a drink and talking and eating and all that sort of stuff. Things we do, right? Get to know each other around the table.
Right.
And so I end up telling her that I'm interviewing you because we still keep in touch, right?
Right.
And anyways, how do you, we'll get to more Lisa, how do you end up connecting with Lisa and what was the photo shoot for?
Yeah, so I actually got featured with one of her photographs with my Daisy Rock guitar. So I was a long-standing Daisy Rock guitar artist. And for those not familiar with the brand, long story short, Daisy Rock was actually a pioneer when it came to creating guitars that are specifically designed for females as well as for young girls in general, because they're more lightweight, the frets are closer together, they're easier to manipulate. And I've already alluded to, I'm 5'4", I'm maybe 120 pounds soaking wet. I'm a pretty tiny woman. I just look big in photos, I guess. It's the boots. I blame the boots. But when I was learning to play guitar, it was really, really challenging for me to find a guitar that wasn't actually causing me tremendous pain on my shoulder and my neck. And having to have the weight of it bear on me for, you know, over an hour playing a set, like it was honestly uncomfortable to play. And then I discovered Daisy Rock guitars and I'm like, oh my God, this completely revolutionized and changed my life. So I ended up being an endorsee with them. It was their first ever Canadian endorsee, which was super cool way back in the day. And I had a long-standing relationship with them up until recently. And through those connections and just mutual acquaintances and knowing everybody, I found out that Lisa was going to be at, I think it was Winter NAMM in Los Angeles. And we were just starting to chat. And I mean, she's a longtime supporter of obviously being a female artist of other female artists. And so invited me to get my photo taken with my axe, Glamour. And I'm pretty honored to have been included among her photo credits, as she has photographed some pretty legendary guitars. So little old me up there in the catalog is pretty darn cool. Yeah.
That's right on. That's right. And NAMM makes sense because she's a big NAMM supporter. So I was wondering about that. Was it because I didn't ask her? I was like, no, I'm gonna wait and get it from Rose and stuff. So she actually sent me some of those pictures that she took of you and the guitar. Can I post them when we do the show?
Absolutely.
Can I?
Yes, please do. Yes.
Okay.
So give her credit for taking such beautiful images.
Absolutely. Okay, so folks, if you want to see some of those pictures, then I'll put the link in the show notes that go over to the website as well, and we'll do that. So the Daisy Rock guitar that Lisa photographed, is that your main guitar now?
It was until recently. So okay. I actually, at the start of this year for touring, I got picked up by Reverend Guitars. Oh. So I'm pretty honored because that's the same guitar sponsor is Billy Corgan from Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah, man.
No big deal at all.
Cool, man.
Yeah, so that was a completely unexpected thing that ended up happening, and I've been proudly rocking Ophelia and Juliet, my two Reverend guitars. Glamour has been put into retirement. However, she has still made some appearances in music videos, so she's in Not My Time as well as The Cure. And I love her, but it was time to kind of put that relationship to rest and start fresh with something new as I kind of enter this new juncture with the Truth Untold. Yeah.
I like to, it's comforting to know that somebody else speaks that way about their instruments, because I tend to
names the guitars. Yeah, I name everything.
Yeah, naming the guitars, and then just it's a relationship that we have, and it's hard for people to understand sometimes that you do have a relationship with the instrument. But it's good to know. So on that Daisy Rock guitar, there's a sticker on it. Be true, and stay alive. Drugs are for losers.
Yep. I think it says everything it needs to say.
How does that make its way onto the guitar?
Well, because I'm a proud straight edge, as I've already alluded to, I'm definitely, I get why people end up finding themselves attracted to drugs for a variety of reasons. I get it, but it's certainly not something that I support, and I certainly don't think it's something that we should encourage in society. So I'd rather take a fairly bold stance as being a proud straight edge, especially because rock and roll is so heavily affiliated with drugs and alcohol consumption and acting, like an idiot, smashing TVs and all that great stuff. I would rather not have that association. I'd rather just be known for being a badass who just wails on distorted guitar.
And has a clear message. It's not a passive message at all. It's a very I'm out there, and you said bold message. So anyways, beautiful guitars. We'll have those pictures up. Speaking of equipment, from an amplifier perspective, Blackstar Amplification, they're makers of guitar amps. They've had an impressive lineup of artists, right? Def Leppard, Neil Schon from Journey, Richie Sambora. You're using their equipment. They've endorsed you. Correct. How does that relationship start?
NAMM again. So many things go back to NAMM. I mean, I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to go to NAMM, but everybody who's anybody goes to that trade show, and it's an honor just to even be invited, let alone being able to perform. So I was invited to perform on account of my Daisy Rock sponsorship, and I had found a Blackstar amplifier in an amp store here in London. So let me circle back. I'm getting ahead of myself with this story. When the Truth Untold founded, remember I told you that originally it was just supposed to be kind of a backing band for my solo album, but then my love of distortion got reignited, and I was like, damn it. Well, inevitably I'm going to be running a rock band again. Pretty much, yeah. It was not intentional. It's just what ended up happening. So upon said occasion, I needed to find an appropriate amplifier. And for the longest time, I had been using PV Bandits. But I had decided that I didn't want something as crunchy. Now, I love PV amplifiers, do not get me wrong, but I wanted something that had a little bit more better tonal separation when it came to cutting through the cleans, because the difference between the Truth Untold and Antihero being my former band, Antihero was a straight up grunge band. I screamed in that band. I wasn't singing a lot of pretty stuff. I mean, at times you could hear that I had capacity, but we were unapologetically a grunge band. So it didn't matter if I had tonal separation with my amp, because essentially it was just loud and obnoxious all the time. That was that band. The Truth Untold, on the other hand, very much with this project, I didn't want to lose what I had established and developed as a solo artist. So getting back to my roots as a classical singer, writing really pretty melodies, but I wanted to amalgamate that with my love of everything that Antihero had brought about too, which is that love of grunge and distortion and hard rock. So I wanted to find a happy medium between the two of them. And so I needed an amplifier that could both be pretty as well as smack you in the face. And so I happened to upon a Blackstar at a guitar shop, and the clean sounded like a Marshall and the distortion sounded like a PV. And inevitably, that's exactly what happened. It was engineers from both companies that made the Blackstar. I'm like, well, this makes sense. And I'm like, this is the perfect amplifier. I will never need to play with anything else because it captures everything as a guitarist I could ever want. And so I fell in love with it basically instantly on the spot. I was like, oh my God, this puppy can wail. And so when I found out that we got the NAMM showcase on account of Daisy Rock being my sponsor, I knew Black Star was going to be in attendance because you get to access to like the vendor list. And so I hit them up. I'm like, hey, this is who I am. This is what I'm all about. We've got a showcase. I'd be super honored if you could attend. I absolutely love your amplifiers. And I wanted to be able to get the dialogue going. And sure enough, believe it or not, the owners of the company found spot in their agenda to come and see us perform. And that's what started that relationship. So pretty damn honored. Yeah.
Shout out to Black Star. We love you too, just for helping. Helping Rose out, helping the sound that she loves. So cool. That's a great story, Rose. Thank you for sharing that. Look at you've talked about the single that you've released, The Cure. June 25th, The Cure comes out. Congrats. It's been hitting tons of radio stations, tons of them, like long list of radio stations have been pumping out The Cure. The video for the single came out, and the last I saw, correct me if I'm wrong, you were almost at 30,000 views.
Oh, it's over that now. Yeah.
It's over that?
It's exceeded that now.
Oh, there we go. I was like, so you're getting a lot of success out of that. What is The Cure?
Well, you have to listen to the lyrics. I can't give away all my secrets.
Give us a tidbit. Is The Cure
music? Music.
Are we talking about a person?
No, music is the cure.
Oh, music is
the antidote, the cure.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. So does this have anything to do with Catherine Gunn?
Catherine Gunn is somehow always involved in shenanigans, of course. People are probably like, who the hell is Catherine Gunn? So Catherine Gunn is my alter ego, inspired by a real life person. And this is the person that I portray in our music videos in Not My Time, and followed up in The Cure, and followed up in our new music video that we're actually in the process of recording right now. But if you want to learn more about Catherine Gunn, you'll just have to watch the music videos.
Okay, can you tell us
she's
this?
An interesting character.
Is there a part of you in Catherine, or Catherine, or the other way around? A part of Catherine in you?
I'd say both.
Oh,
both.
Such mystery.
I know.
So if anybody hasn't, like, and I'm just throwing this out there, if anybody hasn't, and I'm saying, who's Catherine Gunn? And they're like, what is this guy talking about? Right. So, and I have to say what you just said is I need them to just go and absorb the music and the story, and we'll have some links that maybe explain a little bit, but it's a really cool sort of subplot to the whole Rose Cora Perry thing here. So I just loved it. I thought it was so cool. I thought maybe we'd pull a little bit more out, but that's okay. I get it.
Do you know who the real Catherine Gunn is?
Tell us.
It's inspired by a real person. She was
really?
a whistleblower for the British government.
Yes. Okay, but okay, we can't give away too much more though.
No, exactly. So
can't give away too much more.
You can. I want people to actually watch the videos and enjoy it and kind of have their own interpretations. So I'm one of those artists that I remember being told a long time ago when I was in school and I was studying different forms of music and different forms of art, that there's a difference between when you write a song and you put it out into the world, what your intentions are, versus when listeners absorb that song and what they get out of it. And your interpretation and your intentions might be very, very different from what the listeners get out of it, but neither's wrong, right? Art is meant to be subjective. So I don't ever want to put my ideas onto how somebody's going to interpret something. And I mean, obviously, I know what inspired the songs. I know what inspired these plots. I know what inspired the characters. But if somebody has a different read on it or hits them in another way, that's okay too. That's totally fine.
Yeah.
And I mean, as long as it's resonating with them, there's no right or wrong way to enjoy music and to enjoy art. I think it's all cool.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I used to work in a small art gallery, and I learned everything that I could possibly learn about the paintings that I used to have there. And, people would come in and they would say, well, what is that? What is going on in here? What is this painting? And I would say, well, what do you think is going on here? Right. And there were things that I historically knew about the painting or, meanings and things like that, but I would never give it up front because it would skew how they would see it. And so I would say, see it for yourself first. And then we can talk about it. And I think music, and that's what you're saying. Songs are the same way and the music is the same way, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I think context is important. I think, to your point, learning about the history or what inspires something can add greater depth to your appreciation of it. However, if you have a different read, it doesn't mean it's wrong. And this is so funny that you bring this up because I remember, so I went to university and I have a honors BA in social psychology. At one point, I was taking a double major, and half was going to be in English literature, and the other half was going to be in psychology. I know this is not related to music at all, but I'm getting there. I have a point, I promise. I had to inevitably switch my degree from a double major to just the specialization in psychology, and then I did a minor in English literature instead. The reason for this is because I remember being my second year of university and being infuriated with the professor trying to tell me exactly what Shakespeare meant when he had penned a certain sonnet. And I remember thinking in my head, did you personally know the fellow? Did you? Is it really right for you to say that there's only one possible interpretation or one potential read of this? And yes, again, context is important. Yeah. Understanding the history, understanding the socio-political climate, understanding all of those things can lend greater insight and appreciation. But I remember getting into almost a heated argument about the meaning behind Shakespeare's words, thinking, I can't do this anymore. Mentally, I needed to have a reprieve, and I'd rather just focus on a science where I don't have to analyze what may or may not be the correct or incorrect interpretation of somebody's art because I don't agree with it. So there you have it. Fun little anecdote about me.
We will let people absorb it first. And man, someday I do have to meet Catherine Gunn. It would be really cool. Look, you mentioned you're working on a new video as well. When is that? Do we know when that's coming?
Oh, you'll just have to wait and see. I know I'm killing you with all of these
November, December.
Probably realistically more like January, to be honest. We literally just started filming this past week, and if anybody watches my music videos, I hope they do after this interview, they'll see that they're quite elaborate. It's not merely a band just rocking out looking hot. I basically am writing mini movies. I was recently called the Steven Spielberg of music videos. I'm okay with that title. I clearly want to be a screenwriter in some capacity too, because I have so much fun coming up with these elaborate plots. But as a consequence of having these elaborate plots, they take multiple days to shoot, let alone to edit the whole thing together and to make a seamless storyline and then integrate, okay, well, that's a good singing shot. So then we should actually have the live band footage there versus continuing on with the story. So it's a labor of love. It takes several months to put together. So realistically, probably January-ish.
That's awesome. We finally got a scoop. The new video will come out in the new year.
Hopefully. Fingers crossed if everything goes well. Yes.
No, that's awesome. I'm looking forward to that too. Beyond that, anything else, coming up that you can share? New music, shows, anything?
I mean, this is going to be going online after we've concluded our tour, but our last U.S. tour date is this Saturday. We're playing Buffalo, which is pretty exciting for a cool festival called Music is Art, which is actually curated by the bassist of the Goo Goo Dolls. It's his own festival, which is really cool. It's kind of like a love letter back to his hometown of Buffalo. And then we're going to be playing Halloween in Newmarket. So there we do have a Canadian date coming up. Oh my God. Super excited about that.
Where? Tell me where. Do we know?
The Spot. Yes. On Friday, October the 25th. Haven't even announced that yet. So that's like a total scoop because it's not even visible on a website anywhere. You are the first to literally know about this aside from my band.
I'm not far from there. So I'm going to see.
Well, then we'll have to get you out for sure. Yeah. And you better wear a costume because if you don't wear a costume for Halloween, then you obviously don't enjoy life anymore. I mean, you're never too old to dress up.
I'm there. I'm a costume. I love dressing up. So I'm good.
Amazing.
Yeah. Now you got me thinking. I'm like, can I do something that goes with one of your video themes so that you
that would be amazing. You could be an FBI agent. I think you can pull it off. You've got the specs too.
Right?
Yeah, totally.
They used to, some of my friends, they used to call me Mr. Smith from The Matrix there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
I had these other glasses. Anyways, going down a rat hole. But okay, Newmarket, The Spot, October 25th. we're going to see if we can get that out there for folks as well. It's okay, right? If we start telling people.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And then as far as kind of other stuff, writing a lot of new material, super excited about kind of jamming through that over the winter months in hibernation and hitting the road again when the weather is reasonable to do so. So yeah, we usually take the fall and the winter off a little bit just to kind of reconvene because we go pretty hard with the summer touring, and like to just be able to kind of take a little bit of time off. The weather is not ideal for traveling long distances anyways. I'd rather be at home in front of a fire than risking anybody's life on the road if there's a blizzard. And so we'll write some new material and kind of see where next year lands us, but excited for sure.
Right on. And listen, for as far as preference for where fans should grab music from you or engage with you, et cetera. I know you've got the website rosecoraperry.com. But, is that start there, or is there Facebook or Insta, or what's your...
I'm on all of that stuff. I don't care. However somebody wants to reach out to me, it's totally cool. Yeah, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I mean, I receive messages and comments and stuff from all those platforms. If they want to reach out to me on my website, that's totally cool too. Yeah.
It's cool. Rocking on. Rose, I want to thank you for joining me on the show, for letting us, a little bit more into your world. We got into some deep things. We got into some fun things. We got into some light things. Before we do let you go, is there anything else that you'd like to leave us with?
I just want to thank you once again for your time and for having me as a guest on the show. I know that you've had some much bigger artists than little old me. So I'm truly honored to be considered and to have the invite, and thank everybody for listening and supporting this great broadcast that you put together. And I hope people will check out my tunes.
Thank you. That is not Rosa. That is Rose Cora Perry, Canadian rocker and lead for the London, Ontario band The Truth Untold, who've been more than feisty on their journey to save you from the darkest days. For what it's worth, she and the band will tell you the other side of the story and give you the cure for It's Not My Time. I'll have Rose and the band's links in the show notes so you can check it all out. Thanks, Rose. Hope to catch up with you again.
That was the best outro ever.
I had so much fun doing that interview with Rose. We kept talking a little bit after we kind of went off the air on that. And we were talking for a bit even before we went on the air. Just some great chemistry there, chatting with her. Great personality, great person. Now let's get to some of her great music. Here is Rose Cora Perry and The Truth Untold with Don't.
I know that you just can't seem to let go. I know you're scared, now you have lost hope. I will not hurt you, my intentions are pure. You keep on running, you're only just hurting yourself.
Cora and The Truth Untold with their song Don't. Stay tuned later in the show for more music from Rose. Now, let's get to our next segment on IEP with Shelley, Kenow.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the monthly social self-help spotlight. I'm your host, Guido Prino, and I'm welcoming certified special education teacher with her master IEP coach mentorship certification, also the author of Those Who Can't Teach, True Stories of Special Needs Families to Promote Acceptance, Inclusion, and Empathy. I'm happy to welcome Shelley Kenow. Shelley, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well, Guido. Thank you so much for having me on your show today.
Thank you. And I love your teacher sign in the background.
Yes, I'm very proud of teacher. And then you can kind of see over here, I've got although the P got cut off, but that does say IEP, which is the Individualized Education Program, where I'm very passionate.
That's awesome. Love it. Surrounding yourself with the message.
Yes.
Look, I understand you've worked in the United States and England. Where do you call home now?
Southern Illinois.
Southern Illinois.
Yes.
Awesome. What if we were to go to Southern Illinois, what would you tell us to go see or do, or what would you say is an attraction of some kind?
Well, we're just on the other side of the river from St. Louis, Missouri. So you have that option of all the things that are in St. Louis. But in Southern Illinois specifically, we have Shawnee National Forest, we have Carlisle Lake and Hazlitt, Hazlitt State Park, and lots of camping, lots of fishing, sailing. We have lots of outdoor activities. We're a big sports area. We have lots of different schools with lots of different sports teams, and then all the traveling teams. And it's just it's very peaceful. It's farm and rural. So if you want to see cows and pigs and chickens, and you don't get to see those from the city, come on out to Southern Illinois, the Metro East area of St. Louis, and we've got it all.
Yeah, that was a sales pitch. We got to talk to you have like a economic development group there that was like, hey, we need to borrow her lines over here, So
yes, I love it.
Awesome.
This is the area where I grew up, and it's my home. So I'm very proud of where I come from, but also proud to have been I'm still the spouse of, he's just not in the military anymore. So that's what took us over to England.
Oh, right on. Right on. So you got to experience that, and then you were able to come back home, and it sounds like you got a good setup. You can enjoy the scenic, the scenic scenes, but then also it sounds like you can access the city life. So I always like to, ask that type of question. If people listen to the show, they'll know that, just so that we get a sense of geography and, connection, right? So speaking of connection, I'm hoping that you can help us understand a few things today. I'd like to start with, what is a certified special education teacher?
Well, here in the state of Illinois, we have a process that we need to go through to become certified or to become licensed. And that is, I went, got my 4-year degree, but because I'm a special education major, as well as an elementary education major, I had to do an extra year to get that special education certification. And then every few years, I think it's every 5 years, I have to make sure that I have gotten enough professional development hours to be able to renew that certification. And so it's a little bit of a process, but it's well worth it. I don't teach full time in the classroom any longer, but I do still substitute. And without that certification or a bachelor's degree in something, I wouldn't be able to continue teaching. But because I've kept up the actual certification, if I ever decide, okay, I'm finished being a consultant, I want to go back into the classroom, then I'm ready to go.
You also have experience in crisis prevention, applied behavior analysis, discrete trial training, and mental health. There's a lot there. What are some of the differences in these experiences and how you use them?
Yeah, so the applied behavioral analysis, or ABA as it's most widely known, and discrete trial training are very similar in that there is an idea behind that you're working on behaviors Although you can work on academics with both of them, academics also has behaviors included with it. And those behaviors are things such as touching this or matching that, or putting pencil to paper and actually writing things, or putting puzzles together, and all of those sorts of skills. And they try to work with the students and help get the students to a point where they're always regulated, or when they become unregulated, as far as being able to control their emotions, be able to control their feelings, their words, their bodies, that they have skills to be able to pull themselves back. And it's they in ABA, they use things like shaping and facilitating, and there's a lot of data that goes into both of those programs. The crisis prevention helps you to learn when someone is starting to become unregulated, and helps you to look for certain components within each individual as to, maybe somebody, when they start to get anxious, maybe they start to twist their hair, or they start to tap their foot, or they start making a noise, or they do something, or even the look on their face, you can maybe be able to tell that, oh, this person is starting to go. With crisis prevention, they call it the escalation kite. And so they're starting to go up that escalation side to where you don't want them to get to, but they can become into full crisis meltdown mode. And the whole idea for crisis prevention is to help keep them from going into that full crisis meltdown mode. And then the mental health side kind of goes with all of those things. Yeah. I had gotten involved with mental health when I was teaching, but more so about 6 years ago when we lost our daughter's best friend to suicide. And so I have gotten deeper into having more understanding of mental health and making people aware of what's going on, and trying to decrease that stigma of needing help and reaching out and getting that help. I was just looking up statistics today for the mental health walk that's coming up in a couple of months. And because of the pandemic, more people are struggling with their mental health than ever before. And it's not decreasing as much as we would hope now that we're a few years past it. And that's the unfortunate thing about a lot of mental health, is if you don't get the support that you need, it's not going to probably get better on its own.
I'm sorry to hear about your friend's, your daughter's friend and the suicide.
Thank you.
But it's encouraging to hear that you're doing something or to help others in that process. What made you start to focus on IEPs? And you've got the big block letters behind you, IEP. And for those who don't know, IEP is individual education plans. What made you focus on IEPs?
That's a great question. And I love to answer this question because it wasn't me who took me down that path. When I was in third grade, I knew I wanted to be a teacher. And I thought I wanted to be a general education primary level teacher. It's third grade. That's the grade I wanted to teach. And throughout the time of that thought, until the time I actually became a teacher, the thought came to me multiple times that I should work with kids in special education. And I know I look like I'm 12 years old, but I'm not. I've been around for a long time. And the special education law had actually just gone into effect when I was starting kindergarten. And so there wasn't a lot of kids that I was aware of who were in special education. So I erroneously had ideas of what kids who were in special education would look like, or would act like, or what abilities they would have. And so every time that thought came to me, I thought, oh no, I don't want to work with those kids. I'm not going to be able to help those kids. I won't have anything in common with those kids. I'll feel sorry for those kids. And it wasn't until I was put into jobs as I got out of high school that I was working with the kids that would be eligible for special education, but I didn't realize they were the kids that would be eligible because they didn't have an IEP, or not to my knowledge. I was a paraprofessional at the time, and to my knowledge, they were just kids who needed a little extra help. Right. And so finally, while we lived in England, and I had worked in both English schools and on the American base that we were stationed, I realized that I absolutely loved kids who had the really big, really brash, unwanted behaviors. And then I went, oh, I love this. I want to be a special ed teacher. And so I really feel like the Lord was the one that was giving me those thoughts throughout my whole life and was preparing me and just kind of had to hit me upside the head with, here's the kids that you would be working with, Shelley. Don't run away from them. This is where I want you. This is what you're meant to do.
So you followed a path.
I did. Yes.
You answered a call.
Yes. I do
You
feel
answered
like
a
that
call.
it is a calling for me.
Yeah. No, listen, it happens, right? And we talked about earlier, I said in different facets or different things in our lives. So we all get a call to do something different sometimes. And
Yep.
sometimes we fight the call.
Right.
Help us understand what having a master IEP coach mentorship does for you in this IEP space.
Since I'm no longer teaching full time, what the Master IEP Coach Mentorship did for me was reopened my eyes to the law and all the things within the special education law that I had kind of forgotten were possibilities. And we are not lawyers. There are master IEP coaches all over the country, but we are not lawyers. We are not doling out legal advice, but you wouldn't need someone like me if there wasn't a law, because if there had been no special ed law, there would be no special ed classes, there would be no kids going into special education. So I do especially because I've always been a lover of the law. That was always one of the areas, if there was something offered in professional development that had to do with the law or how the brain worked or behaviors, those were the three areas that I always was most interested in. And so as a master IEP coach, there's a whole network of us. A lot of people are parents and they have not had the same kind of training that I've had coming into the master IEP coach program. And we just go through and we learn different ways to look at things. And it's really given me a different perspective, even for my own general education colleagues. When I left teaching, I didn't necessarily have the best view of a lot of my colleagues. I had to butt heads with them multiple times in my teaching career. And it's a poor way that we set up our systems here in the United States for education, because you have your general education and your special education teachers, and the special education teacher is supposed to be the case manager and making sure that the students that are in the gen ed rooms are getting their IEPs followed. Right. But yet the special ed teacher isn't the gen ed teacher's boss. But it feels like that we're acting that way to the gen ed teacher when we come in and say, well, are you providing this accommodation? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? And we're not trying to be their boss, but it kind of and so it's not the right setup, I don't think. And so going through the Master IEP Coach mentorship reminded me of how little training our gen ed teachers receive in college on special education and what different approaches can be and why it's important and what the IEP is. And then I thought, oh, and yet here we have this law that says everybody who has an IEP that it's determined by that team that child should go into the general education for 5 minutes or the whole day. We're expecting these gen ed teachers to teach these kids, yet they don't have the training. They don't have the knowledge. And so it just helped me change my perspective about my gen ed colleagues. And then that's when I started teaching gen ed teachers I now provide the professional development that I have to also get. So I can't count my own. I have to go do other people's classes. But yeah, I'm now side by side with those other professional development providers, learning from and teaching them as well.
So you are the subject matter expert when you're placed in that environment. You're working with a set of a professional community, like other professional communities would, whether they're doctors or lawyers or some other thing. Right. And that's what that brings together for you in this space. Just bringing people are with us listening in the boat. We're just going over to the other side of the river with them as we talk about that. Right. Now, when you apply these things. And obviously, parents are going to be a big part of the conversation.
Absolutely. Yes.
As we get into some of the specifics of IEPs, as the SME on this, right? What are some of the signs that parents could look for that may suggest, hey, maybe my kid needs an IEP? What are some of the signs, if you can share with us?
Yeah, sure. So the first thing that I tell parents is trust your parent gut. If you think that your child is not catching on to materials, or they're coming home and they're just exhausted at the end of the day, or they are having major meltdowns at night, um, those are kind of some signs that your child is quite possibly struggling. And so you want to talk to the teacher. When you have your parent teacher conferences, if the teacher talks about, well, we prompted your child to do this, or we're constantly reminding your child to focus or pay attention, or they don't put their name on their paper very often, or anything where it sounds like the teacher might be going above and beyond what they would be doing for other people in the class, doesn't matter what age, that's a sign too that, okay, it's wonderful that this teacher at this age is doing this, but that's not going to guarantee that next year's teacher is going to do that. And so you want to talk to the classroom teacher and talk about what are the steps to have my child evaluated for special education. And if your school does the full evaluation, and you as the parent are an equal member of that team, you have an equal say in whether or not your child qualifies or doesn't qualify based on all the assessments that will be done to go through that evaluation. If the whole team says, you know what, we just need to put in a few accommodations, we don't have to have specially designed instruction, there's another document called the Section 504 plan. And if your child only needs some accommodations and maybe some related services, but they don't need that specially designed instruction, then that Section 504 is an option for you. So I find oftentimes that schools don't offer that Section 504 when they find a student ineligible for an IEP. But I want parents to understand that if you still think your child needs help, and they deny, or you've all determined that an IEP or that eligibility for special education is not necessary, ask about that Section 504 plan and see if that might be. Because we all as teachers have different approaches. And so just because I do it a certain way one year, that seems to work for your child, if that's not written down to do it that way, the next teacher might not do it that way because that's not their personality. That's not their way of thinking. That doesn't mean that they're a bad teacher. It's just they're a different person. But if you have it written down into either an IEP or a 504, then they have to do those certain things.
So I just want to make sure here in all of this, the teacher is the first place to start?
Yes.
Is there a reason why a teacher wouldn't want to do an IEP if a parent says, hey, I think we should do an IEP?
Many teachers find that having special education for a student puts a stigma on that student.
Right.
And they don't want to add that stigma to that student if they can just make some accommodations and do some things like that. There are some people who don't quite understand how great special education can be. And they oftentimes will think, well, this is not going to be good for the student because they're not going to learn as much, or the parent is, overprotective and it's okay that their child is struggling a little bit. Or if I put this kid in special education, I might have more work. I don't typically think that that's the majority of the time. I really think that the majority of the time is that they're worried about the child having that stigma of going into special education.
If they do get that resistance, what would be a parent's next step without, the feeling would be, well, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want my kid centered out. What is the nice next step to take?
I would have a face-to-face conversation. So I always say do everything in writing. If you have written to the teacher and you've said, I think my child needs to be evaluated for special education, and you've listed a few reasons, like, they're in 8th grade and they are still reading at a 3rd grade level, or they're, in 7th grade and their anxiety is through the roof and, they just melt down every night. I would then, after you've put that in writing, if that teacher says, no, I don't think so, then I would go to the principal No, I'm sorry. I would first go to the teacher and have that face-to-face conversation, like, help me understand, let's have this face-to-face conversation. And if you're still not, then absolutely, because if you put it in writing, the school has to respond to you in writing.
You had also mentioned something, and I just want to validate it or verify it. An IEP should get updated every year.
Yes. So the law states that it should be reviewed at least once a year. It needs to be looked at it, and most likely you're going to revise it because you've hopefully had a year's worth of learning, and the goals that you were working on, hopefully you're moving on to other goals or increasing the effectiveness. If for some reason they don't get it done within that year time frame, your IEP does not expire. It just means that the school is non-compliant because they didn't follow the law for that particular part of the law. So I want parents to understand, and teachers too, because I think a lot of teachers think that's the case, that, oh my gosh, it's April 17th, but we were supposed to have this by April 16th. And now this kid doesn't have an IEP anymore. Right. Yes, the child's IEP is still in place. There's ways that somebody gets released from special education, but it's not because you've gone past the annual review date.
What are some of the things that we should focus on to get the right plan in place? And what does it mean for IEP goals to be SMART?
So how to get the plan in place, the things that you need to have in there are current, present levels of information. So that's academics and functional things. If they've done evaluations and those evaluations were 2 years ago, it's okay to have that information in the IEP, but you don't necessarily want to look at that as still being current because your child has changed in those 2 years. You want to look at grades, you want to look at behaviors, you want to look at how they're functioning motorically, with speech, with behavior, how their health is. And then you also want to check in on those academics and all the different academic areas. Then when you get to the goals, having a SMART goal, SMART is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, actionable or attainable, relevant or reasonable, and time. And I'm going to caveat this with, you can have the best written SMART goal, but if it doesn't apply to the student or it doesn't make sense for the student, then it's still not a good goal. But you want to have those letters in mind. You want to make sure that a goal is written for your child's needs, not some generic goal that, everybody at age 16 needs to know how to fill out an application for a job. If your child has a job, don't allow that to be one of your child's goals. So it has to be specific to your child's needs. The actionable and attainable, you want to make sure that you're not making, like, if they're coming in at 10% of something, you may not be able to make 90% accuracy in a year's time. You may only be able to make 50% and have that as an attainable goal. So you want to think about that. There's so often that teachers automatically just put in 80% accuracy. And sometimes they don't realize that the kid's already doing a skill to 60 or 70%. You're not growing much if you're only growing 10 or 20% in an entire school year. The relevant and reasonable, again, you're kind of thinking reasonable as far as, is it attainable? Are we not giving them too much or too little of what we're expecting out of them? But the relevant is making sure that it's relevant for society today. When I think about the things that I did as a child, and that, I learned, and I actually probably spent too much time trying to teach some of my students pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters, their value, what the names of them were, what they looked like. And in today's society, it's rare that people are using pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters. Now, I'm not saying don't teach those, but don't spend countless years trying to get a student to understand those concepts. Instead, you've taught them and you've gone over it. Now let's talk about how you need money and why you need money and how it buys things and how you have to have more than what you want to buy. And, whatever level they're at, think about, how does this relate to them in today's society? Social media, even those kinds of things, texting. So many people, we don't write things anymore. We type them out or we text them. And so still, like, teaching them to understand their audience. Yeah, it might be okay to use this kind of language with your friends, but if you're going for a job interview or you're talking to your grandmother, you need to have this kind of language, and teaching them those kinds of differences. So just making sure that it's relevant to what's happening today. I'm sure you've heard the saying from a teacher at some point in your life, you won't have a calculator with you everywhere you go. And now look, everybody has a calculator with them everywhere they go.
Yeah. How did that work out for them? No. No, I think, the two takeaways there are, we start with the I, which is individual, and that they should be individual plans that are based on the needs of the student. As we're applying those things, make them modern, make them relevant. Otherwise, it's kind of a bit of a useless plan. Look, you started to talk about this. You hinted at it a little bit earlier when you used the word stigma. I sound silly maybe asking this. Is there still a stigma attached to kids who have an IEP? Are they treated differently? Is there cognitive bias? And if there is all of that, help us understand it. How come it hasn't changed? How do we change it?
Yes, it's not a silly question. I wish I could say it's a silly question because no, it doesn't exist, but it does exist. There is still the stigma, and it is a cognitive bias. The stigma with special education is that somehow those who need special education are less than everybody else. And when I went through college back in the 1900s, it was a long time ago, we did learn that, for so many of our students in special education, they have to have average or above average IQs. And what we were taught was that 80% of the population learns the way that the majority of teachers teach. Well, that leaves 20% of the population that doesn't learn that way. And those many, many times are the percentage of kids who are being found eligible for special education. How we change it is by helping our teachers when they're going through school to be a teacher understand that special education is not less than. It's different, and different isn't wrong or bad. Different is just different. As parents, we need to work with our kids and explain that to them. If you see when you're dropping your kid off at school that there is someone also being dropped off that looks a little bit different, it doesn't matter what that difference is. Talk to your child about, maybe the child is in a wheelchair or uses a cane or has a different color skin or is dressed very differently. It doesn't matter what the difference is. Just talk to your child and say, different is just different. It doesn't mean bad. And, this might be your best friend if you give them a chance. But if you just walk away from them because they look different or act different or sound different than you do, you're missing out on amazing opportunities for friendship, for growth in yourself, for possibilities of things that you could achieve together. And we need to do better as parents. I think so often we spend so much time in our special education classrooms teaching our students that are eligible how to interact, how to behave, and be around the 80%, but we never spend time teaching the 80% how to behave and interact with the 20%. And if we could do that in our classrooms, if we could do that in our society and in our families, we could dispel those cognitive biases. We all have cognitive biases. It's just our brain's way of sort of categorizing all the 74 gigabytes of information that all of us process every single day and saying, okay, this matches this, and this is how I'm going to think. And until those are challenged, they'll stay that way. And a lot of times we aren't even aware that we have them. Like I had a cognitive bias growing up about those kids in special education. And it wasn't until my biases were challenged that I saw that I was wrong, and I saw the possibilities and had my perspective changed. So there's the buzzword of inclusion. And I just talked to a parent about this today. she asked me, well, what's the definition of inclusion? I have friends who ask me about what inclusion is for my son. And I said, well, you have to think about, is that literally just putting your child in the gen ed classroom, but yet they're not doing the same things. They're not interacting with the peers. They're over off to a side and they're just working with the paraprofessional or doing something completely different. To me, that's not inclusion. To me, that's, well, we're in the same space at the same time, but the kids aren't interacting with me. I'm not interacting with the material that's being taught. And just knowing, involve me and accept me for exactly who I am, and don't look at me as less than because I'm different.
Inclusion is the shared experience.
Yes.
Yeah. What's the difference when it comes to introducing kids with a disability in the general education classroom? Is it really just the talk that helps with that experience, or, and is it the parent? Is it the teacher? Is it the special educator? Is it everybody?
It's everyone, and it's not just talking, it's modeling it as well. If you have a teacher who makes comments when the child leaves the gen ed room to go to a special education room, or when they come into the room for the first time because they went right from their morning into their special ed room and then they join the gen ed room later, if there are comments made, if there is body language that is speaking that I don't really want this child here, I'm glad they're not in the room when they're not in the room, and I'm apprehensive when they're in the room. The teacher has to be the model and has to show that inclusion. And it's simple things to do. I mean, as far as if you have a student that comes into your room, even if it's only 5 minutes a day, have a spot. Like, you have a spot for everybody, every other student. Have a desk. Have a name tag on that desk if everybody else has a name tag. Have whatever everyone else in the room has. Make sure that that student has all that same stuff. When they come into the room, if you're in the middle of your lecture, I'm not asking you to stop your lecture, but acknowledge let's just give them a wave. But if you can stop and say, hey, Shelley, glad you're here today. We're on, page 342 today. Turn to that page, instead of, oh, okay, hold on. Shelley, go to your desk. Now you got to get your book. There's a very different approach there. And every student feels that and sees that. And so, yeah, it has to be that it's modeled by the adults, but it's also taught, it's also talked about. When that child maybe isn't in the room, then you can have that full class discussion of, tell me how you feel when Shelley comes into the room, and validate that they're curious or they're scared or they're angry or whatever their feelings are, but then talk to them again about the fact that that different is not less. They're just different, and many families of children who have disabilities welcome the questions, so get to know that family a little bit and ask them, would you be willing to come in? Especially if your child has a visible disability. I always say there's really only two types of disabilities. There's invisible and visible. And so if your child has to use a wheelchair or has to use crutches or uses a talking device, whatever it is, talk to those gen ed peers and then have that discussion with them of, okay, I understand that this scares you or you have questions about it, and those are all valid. And then you talk about, okay, but now let's think about it from Shelley's perspective, and give them that empathy lesson and teach them again, like, hey, ask Shelley, and ask the parents. As the teacher, get to know the parents and ask them, like, would you be comfortable coming in and talking to my class or to the whole school or whatever, however it would work out best. Because a lot of parents would prefer that you ask them questions than make assumptions about them or their child and their lives. And that's kind of why I wrote the book, to be honest.
Now, do we have stats on, hey, look, those who've leveraged an IEP, how does it correlate to their future education, their employment, and their future living plans? Have we collected enough data that we can apply any of that now?
Not that I am aware of. I can tell you from my own experiences and other teachers that I've
Yeah.
spoken with, that when special education is done correctly, it has amazing outcomes.
Right.
I have seen, and I've been privileged to be part of almost every one of the students that I have worked with, that someone in their life told them, you'll never be, you'll never go, you'll never do. And they've gone and they've done and they are. And so I think I don't know what the statistics are as far as success rates. I do know that we have approximately 7 million students in our schools in the United States that are eligible for special education. And there's probably more, but we just aren't able to catch everyone, or parents don't want them to be identified because of that stigma. And because sometimes special education isn't done well and the gaps widen instead of getting smaller.
You've used the word behavior, as we've talked in some of the questions. You've developed some behavior modification techniques as part of the program. How do those techniques play into the IEP for kids and for parents?
So, what you asked me earlier about the ABA, the discrete trial training, the crisis intervention, I took pieces from each of those and then my own experiences and figured out what seemed to work. And also it was a big experience that I had in England where we actually brought in a behavioral specialist. Now we have board certified behavior analysts, or BCBAs, all over the United States. But at that time, a behavioral specialist was a very rare commodity. And learning how to hold the students accountable for their actions while teaching them how to manage some of those unwanted behaviors and find out why they had the unwanted behaviors. And then try to work on fulfilling the needs that they weren't getting met, and that's why they were exhibiting behaviors. So I have learned over the years that all behavior is communication. So what is it that behavior is communicating? Is it a sensory need? Is it a skill need? Is it an escape need? Is it an attention need? And then not stopping at that level, but still digging deeper and saying, well, why is this child wanting attention? Why does this child try to escape? And then finding out, okay, well, they're trying to escape because they're too overwhelmed, or they don't have the skills necessary to do it, or something is scaring them, or something is, there's literally millions of things, I think, that can be causing certain behaviors to happen in children. And when we can figure that out, if they don't have the skill, well, okay, then we need to teach them that skill. And if we can teach them that skill, then they don't have to use that behavior to get your attention anymore. And so often, though, we just stop at okay, well, now I know the function, which is that, that's attention seeking, the sensory seeking, that sort of thing. And so we have to look at the whole child and figure all of that stuff out. We have to know the mental health stuff. Is there something going on outside the classroom? Is there something going on that I can't see with this child? Maybe they didn't sleep well. Maybe their parents are getting divorced. Maybe they have a deployed parent. Maybe they're a refugee. And all of that plays into a child and an adult's ability to function. As adults, typically, hopefully, we've learned some coping skills, but our students don't have that. And we also have to, I believed and incorporated this in my program, was I can't say, well, this child should act this way, or this child should know this by a certain age. Because not everyone was raised the same way that I'm raised. Not everyone raises their children the same way I raised my child. There is no should. There are, at approximately this age, children learn this skill or that skill, or their brains are ready to learn this skill or that skill. But even if their brain is ready, it doesn't automatically mean that the child is ready, because of all the other things that could be happening at that time. So my behavior management was having that understanding of all of those kinds of things, and remembering that each person is an individual, which I know seems really strange to say out loud, because of course everybody is an individual. But we don't apply that when we're working with a person. We just want to do a quick and easy fix. And you're not going to have a quick and easy fix with almost every behavior, because you have to figure out what's going on underneath the surface. What is that behavior communicating? So it was just the encompassing of the whole attitude, the whole idea of the whole child, and then holding them responsible for their behaviors and their actions, but also wrapping around and teaching them they're responsible, how to change it, feeling that need that they were not having met prior, and then making sure that they understood that I did not see them as their behavior. I didn't like certain behaviors, but I liked them. And really being able to have the child understand that I still cared about them, I still loved them, no matter how big or bad the behavior was.
So you go beyond the universal general markers, you take into account environment and other aspects of these things.
Mhm.
And it's transferable outside of school to the
Mhm.
home environment, depending on what you recognize through the techniques to be able to apply.
I teach courses on understanding behavior now because I wanted to understand, why is this kid acting this way? Well, why does this kid act this way? Why can I give this student choice A and it's beautiful, and I give this student choice A and it's a nightmare?
You take it apart,
take it apart.
put it back together. And
Yeah.
how many different ways can I put it back together? And I give this
Yep.
example because as we're trying to help people, right? And so they're just
Right.
examples. And you might have a different experience, but if you can relate to some of those examples.
Mhm.
You said a word earlier too. What is a paraprofessional, and what's their role in the process?
Yeah, so a paraprofessional, you could also call that person a teacher's assistant or a teacher's aide, an education. They have lots of different terms, but it's a person who in a classroom is not the head teacher, but who is there helping out with whatever. It could be that they're helping out with just academics. It could be that they're helping out with medical. It could be that they help out with hygiene things. And so it's just that other person who is not the teacher or a co-teacher.
Got it. Makes sense. I just wanted to frame that so
Yes.
we understood what that is. You throw these little tidbits out there sometimes. So look, you also talked about the book.
Yes.
And I did it in the intro. It's the book you authored, Those Who Can't Teach. What motivates you to write the book? Who should read it? What's our takeaway from it?
The book is, as I mentioned before, very much about looking at people differently and understanding that different does not mean less than. The title comes from the saying that no teacher cares for, which is those who can do, those who can't teach.
Right.
And I have asked every teacher that I've ever known, why don't you like that saying? And it's because it makes us seem like we are less than every other profession. And that's what everyone in the book felt at some point, or feels most of the time, that they are looked at as less than because either they are a family or the actual individual who is eligible for special education, or in the family's case, has someone eligible for special education. And so they do, unfortunately, have that you can't have a good life. And the reason can't is in quotation marks, which I know your listeners can't see that, and you can't hear that when you say the title, but because everyone has been told that's in the book. Like I said, you're not going to have a good life. You can't be happy. You'll never be normal. You can't go to college. You can't do this. You can't run. You can't walk. You can't talk, blah, blah, blah. But yet, just like teachers, if we allow ourselves to be open and learn from each other, we can learn so much from every person. And at the end of each of the chapters, each chapter is based on interviews that I did with either the individual, or usually it was the mom, but sometimes mom and dad shared the stories of what their lives are like. And I put at the end of each chapter the things that I learned from each family or individual because of either knowing them personally, being their teacher, or just through the interview process. you ask me who should read the book, and of course I want to say everyone, and I truly believe that everyone would benefit from reading the book. However, as a teacher, because I had taught some of my students, I had a group of students. I had one for 8 years, one for 9 years, and two for 10 years. And so I thought I really knew what it was like, because I had been integrated into these families. I was going to family functions, they were, I would see them out, and I just kind of knew everything. And then once I wrote the book and did the interview, I shouldn't say once I wrote the book, once I did the interviews with the families, I realized I maybe had a thimbleful of knowledge of what it was really like to walk in their shoes every day. And so it's really, if you have a teacher in your life or you are a teacher, this is going to challenge you. It's going to hopefully change your perspective. I've done multiple now book studies, probably with close to 1,000 teachers now of the book. It's been out since 2020. And 100% of them say they recommend it to other teachers because it gives that perspective of the individual and the family. We forget as teachers that we share custody of these kids. We have them 8 hours a day, 180 days a year, but then there's this other group of people who have them many more hours and many more days. And so just looking at things from their perspective and understanding, in a lot of cases, while school to a teacher is top priority, it's a priority in families, but it might be the 50th priority. It might be the 10th priority. And to be able to see, it's not that they don't like school or that they're trying to be lazy or that, they're trying to make excuses. They really have a lot of other things going on that we don't know about.
Yeah. And, as you're saying that, and you've put everything in the context of traditional school, right? Like you look at this is IEP, we apply these behaviors, we understand these things. But as you're saying these things, I'm thinking to myself, and I tend to do this sometimes, just thinking even beyond that segment there. I used to coach hockey, and not all kids responded to the same instruction on the ice the same way. I've worked in a corporate environment. Not all resources learned the same way, consumed information the same way. We have an opportunity here. Maybe the book gives you insights into other parts of our world outside of school. We're not going to give IEPs to everybody, but
no.
I think that just learning that and understanding some of the work that you did, some of the stories, and some of the techniques that you used, that maybe they could also benefit in those other spaces as well. Where's the best place to get the book?
You can get it through me, and then you'll get an autographed copy, but you can, and that's through my website. But I do want to reiterate what you said. And like I said, I do think that everybody should read the book. It's 1 in 6 people has a disability. Right. So it is your neighbor, it is your coworker, it is the person that you're sitting next to at church or that you see at the grocery store. And so it would help everybody, but teachers are the people that are there the most outside of the parents. So you can get it through me, through my website. You can get it on Amazon, pretty much anywhere that books are sold. It should be available. It may not be on a shelf, but you should be able to order it at your bookstore or Amazon or Barnes & Noble, wherever.
So look, you've demonstrated a wide range of knowledge and experience, and you talked about your website, Kenow.com. I'll get that in the show notes, and we'll spell it out the right way so folks can see that as well when we do our video edition, of course. Outside of your books and blogs, do you offer services to anyone who's interested? And is the website the right connection point for that?
Yes, I offer one-to-one coaching for parents and teachers, anyone that's going through the special education process. I attend IEP meetings. I can write parent input statements. And yes, the website, it would be the place to look for that.
Shelley, thank you for taking the time to educate us, share your experiences with us on IEPs, behavior, inclusion, integration, and some of the progress that you've helped make. Is there anything else that you would like to say or leave us with before we close out our segment?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And I very much believe we know who we are, but not who we will be. And I have my own podcast called #NoLimits, where that's the main concept of the show, because I saw and have seen and continue to see students, especially, that were given the "you're never going to, you won't do those things." And like I said about not having a calculator with you everywhere you go, we don't know what kind of technological advances, medical invention, scientific tech, all of those kind of things, miracles. We just don't know what's going to happen in the future. And to say and to truly believe that someone is only going to reach a certain potential, I disagree with wholeheartedly. So #NoLimits, and we could be who we want to be, or be someone different than we are today.
That is #NoLimits. Shelley Kenow, certified special education teacher with her Master IEP Coach Mentorship certification. Also the author of Those Who Can't Teach, True Stories of Special Needs Families to Promote Acceptance, Inclusion, and Empathy. I will have all of her contact information in the show notes. Thank you again for doing this with us. Shelley, I do hope that we can catch up again.
Yes, I would love that. Thank you, Guido.
As we kick off the school year, I'm hoping that segment will help some of you out as you're learning about your children and what's going on with their education. Now, let's head down to Australia with Baron Hansen.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the monthly social self-help spotlight. I'm your host, Guido Perino, welcoming Baron Hansen from down under, that's right, Australia, where he's already lived my day. And we're going to talk about his goal to teach 1% of his town to meditate and measure whether they can create any change within the greater community. It's going to be an interesting one, folks. Welcome to the show, Baron. How are you doing?
Guido, good morning from the future, down under.
It's spooking me out. Time travel is real. Like you've lived my day, man.
I can send you the lotto numbers.
I always get a kick out of it on New Year's Eve, and when we're watching and y'all celebrate, and you're already sleeping by the time we're saying Happy New Year. So, but it's kind of cool. I love it. It's morning there, and you're specifically in. I hope I say this right. Correct me if I don't. Nowra, right?
It's very hard for Americans and Canadians to announce, but you absolutely nailed it. Nowra. It's the name comes from the Aboriginal word for black cockatoo, and there's a whole Dreamtime story about how Nowra got its name and how the black cockatoo's got its name. It's beautiful.
That's awesome. Black cockatoo. Information just pours out of guests on this show, so we've now learned what the meaning of Nowra, and it is in Australia. It's south of Sydney, right?
Yep. 2 hours south of Sydney.
2 hours south of Sydney. So look, aside from your project and the black cockatoo, and your project we're going to get into in a little bit more detail, what is something else unique about Nowra, Australia?
So Nowra, I grew up in Nowra. I'm a fifth generation family from there. And when I was growing up, Nowra had a really bad reputation. It was like, I was embarrassed to tell people I was from Nowra. And if anybody is from a small town, like it comes from a country town, they might resonate with this. And so as soon as I could, I was 18, I was like, I'm out of here. I'm off. And I left Nowra for greener pastures, call it. And then it probably took me about 14 years to realize that actually Nowra is a pretty good place. And I traveled all over the world. I lived in New York City for 8 years. And then now I've found myself back in Nowra working on this project. So I don't know if people have had that experience of like, you think your home is this place, and then you grow up and you're like, oh, actually this place isn't as bad as I thought. So I'm back here now.
So what made Nowra, when you were away and you were in New York, you just said, what made Nowra home when you were away?
Yeah, really, really good question. So do you remember 2019, 2020, there was some really bad bushfires in Australia? It kind of made national news. And so the fire front started about 600 kilometers or about 300 miles, 350 miles away from our house. And over the course of 6 weeks, it moved progressively closer. And on January 4th, our house was meant to burn down. And so I flew back from New York to Nowra to help with the cleanup process. And when I was flying, so I was in the air, the wind actually changed direction. And so this fire front that had taken 6 weeks to move towards our house changed direction. And about 12 of our neighbors lost their house on that day, but our house was spared. So we kind of come right up to the brink of it. And, you know, what I got back and what I realized is that there was a really strong sense of community. And I was living in New York City, millions of people, lots of diverse communities, but what I was lacking was kind of like that community aspect. You can be a real stranger in New York City. You can be very lonely in New York City. And what I realized is that, you know, these people who are neighbors and friends were all looking out for one another.
Yeah.
And that's what I was really craving. So I think when you ask, you know, what was I missing? What made me miss home was community, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting. You can be whatever you want in New York City. And I don't know how many, when you say smaller community, how big is Nowra?
Yeah, so the population of Nowra is 25,000.
Right.
Pretty small.
So you make your way from Nowra, you travel the world, you find yourself in New York, and then you go back from New York to Nowra. Do you miss the Big Apple?
I haven't missed it for a day. I'm happy to be home.
And everybody in Nowra loves to hear you say that, by the way. So if they're listening, we're going to talk today about, and I mentioned in the beginning, some meditation. You say that Vedic meditation. I know some people say Vedic, but I think it's Vedic meditation might be the more mainstream way to say it. You say it's the cornerstone of everything you do now, and that it has helped you uncover your true self. If you can, briefly, what is Vedic meditation, and how did it help you find your true self? Is that something that happened on that plane ride from New York back to Nowra?
Yeah, I think it was happening probably before that. But, you know, when I moved to New York, I think I was very much chasing, we call it object referral happiness, right? The accumulation of things will make me more happy. Right. And New York is very much like that. You know, everyone's trying to get on top of someone else to get the bigger apartment or get the bigger business. The problem with object referral happiness is that you're always chasing. It's the rat race, right? Chasing. And it's very ego driven. And New York City is very good at inflating egos and loves egos. And so, you know, for me, I moved to New York and I was trying to build a business. I was trying to get the girl. I was trying to make all this money. And what I started to realize is that is an unsustainable way of life. You know, you're just always trying to get something. And I was really fatigued and I was really unhappy when I was there. And I picked up Vedic meditation. And it was a way for me to kind of battle the fatigue and battle the stress that was in that place, in New York City at that time. And what Vedic meditation and how it helped me to get back to my true self is, what I believe is that inside of all of us, we have a place of deep inner contentedness. That is, we're not worrying about the past. We're not worrying about the future. We're not overthinking. We just are. And when I started to meditate, that's what I started to touch. I started to feel that place of deep inner contentedness inside of my meditation. And the more that I did that, the more that when I opened my eyes, the more that place started to stay. So I would say that, to sum up your question, is that slowly, progressively over time, having this practice allowed me to move out of the object referral happiness and more towards a self-referral happiness, you know, happiness that is created from within.
When you do the meditation thing and you're in New York, did you go looking for it or did it find you?
The lifestyle that I was living in New York City was very unsustainable, meaning that I was partying a lot. I was indulging in drugs and alcohol, a lot of late nights. I was also training for marathons, and I was just, my way of getting out of my own head was just to run really long distances, which is also pretty unsustainable. And I was on a crash course. And my business partner, who was a meditator, he learned when he was at Berkeley at college, he found me sleeping under my desk probably one too many times at lunchtime, kind of kicked me and said, "Hey, you should go try this thing." And I didn't even look it up. I didn't Google it. I just went to the local meditation teacher and I signed up and I brought my course fee and I came and I did a course. And almost immediately it really worked. Like I felt the effects in the first few days of it. And my teacher gave me a challenge. He's like, try this for 30 days and see what happens. And I did it for 30 days and I've never stopped. It's been 8 years now. So it was just the one that clicked, it was the one that worked.
So in a way, it came to you, and then you came to it. There was something mutual that happened in this process. Now, tell us about this idea that you have. And I don't mean to say it in a way that sounds like, what are you doing? But it's an idea. You have this idea that you're trying to get 1% of Nowra, of your town, to meditate so that you can measure change within the community. Why does Nowra need change?
Well, for me personally, I always, had that bad attitude that I said, the bad attitude towards Nowra. And Nowra has always been the brunt of a lot of jokes in our area. It's the service town for a lot of beautiful little hamlet towns that all surround it. And it's abundant with nature. And it just turns out that Nowra has this really bad reputation. There's a whole meme page dedicated to like memes that bag out Nowra. And so Nowra's got this bad rap. Some people call it the ice capital of the world. It gets that kind of reputation. And after the bushfires, there was a lot of stress. There was a lot of stress inherent in the community from not only inside the community, but the people who had been affected by bushfires, but the stress that was already there. A lot of disadvantaged people, a lot of drug abuse, violence. And so what I wanted to do with this project was that I wanted to show that if Nowra could heal through meditation, then any town could heal through meditation. And so, set out with the ambitious but totally achievable mission to try and teach 1%. So of Nowra, that's about 250 people. And so if those 250 people start meditating, can it have a ripple effect throughout the greater community?
And I was going to say to you, how are you going to measure that you've effectively reached that 1%? Are you able to do that?
Yes. So the inspiration for the 1% effect came when I was studying to be a meditation teacher. So I was living in New York and people started to ask me, what's your secret? Why are you so calm and cool, collected all the time? And I was like, well, it's, this meditation practice. And so I started to train to be a teacher because I was getting lots of inquiries. And then when I was doing my teacher training, I came across this research about meditation. I'm very science-based and science-backed. I love to understand, the science of things and how they work. And I was reading about this research into meditation that was done in the 1970s and the 1980s about this thing called the Maharishi effect. And it's this idea that if you can get 1% of a given population to start meditating, it can have this ripple effect throughout the community. And the most famous experiment they did this experiment about 55 times across America and across the world. And one summer, they took all of these meditators, I think about 4,500 advanced meditators to Washington, D.C. for a summer. And during that summer, all they did was they just meditated in big groups in this big hall, right? And during that summer, the violent crime rate in Washington dropped by 23%. And then after they left, it went back up. And the chief of police came out at that time and said, the only thing that could cause that kind of change in crime would be 3 foot of snow. And, this is the middle of summer. Right. And you look at other cities during that time, nothing changed. No policing changed, nothing changed. All it was the presence of these meditators. And, the mechanics of what's happening is that, we exist in a field, right? We exist in a collective consciousness. In the same way our cells make up a human body, our individuals, all the individual humans make up human collective. And so the theory goes, and this is what I'm trying to recreate in Nowra, is that a small number of people de-exciting their nervous system can have a ripple effect on the greater community and have an effect, and it affect things like crime rates. So how I'm measuring it is I'm obviously teaching people to meditate, and I'm keeping track. But we also have things like group meditations, and we're having a big gathering of meditators in October. So inviting lots of meditators to come to Nowra to meditate and take part in the experiment over the whole month of October.
So you've got some engagement going on, and I love the fact you have some evidence-based history to go on that you're applying to your endeavor here. But how overall has it been received in Nowra as you go about engaging residents? And then how do you engage residents? Like, are you sitting in the grocery store line and saying, "Hey, you ever heard of?" Or, "Hey, if it looks like you're having a bad day, you know what might help you?" Like,
I thought going back to Nara that there would be a lot more pushback and a lot more skepticism about meditation. This is an Indian tradition, it's like it's called Vedic meditation. It comes from India. It's about 5,000 years old. And Nara is typically Christian, pretty white. It's not very diverse, so I was expecting that there would be at least a few people with pickets out the front, like, leave us meditators, go away. But I think that in the last 5 years, and you've probably noticed this with your show and these kind of things, that meditation is starting to get a lot more in the popular zeitgeist. It's a lot more common and understood. Things like Instagram and TikTok have really gotten the word out there. And so I've been really surprised at the diversity of clientele that have come in to learn to meditate. Tradies, people who work on buildings, school teachers, school students, retired people who have just been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I'm getting like all of these wide variety of people, and the fact is that they're all stressed. And there's more stress in the collective than ever. And what meditation helps to release is stress. So I would say that I was surprised, but I'm pleasantly surprised that everybody has kind of just come and showed up.
And your project is called, I love this, by the way, Be Here Nowra. Obviously, it has to be a play on word in terms of be here now for yourself, but Be Here Nowra. And I understand also that you're documenting this on film. What do you plan on doing with the film? Are we going to see you like at an international film festival with a documentary, or what are you going to do with this?
Yeah, so what I was doing when I was in New York is I was making documentary films. So at my heart and my passion, and I'm sure this resonates with you, is storytelling. As part of the return to Nowra was like, wow, let's make a film about this. Let's amplify the people of Nowra. Let's amplify what happens here by following and documenting the process. And one of the most interesting things, and it's the same with podcasting, I'm sure, is like, you don't know what the outcome is going to be. We sat down here with a little bit of a plan, but it can go in 100 different directions. And so I think that's what I love about documentary filmmaking, is that we don't actually know yet what the outcome is going to be. And so we've been filming for 2.5 years, rolling cameras. We've been capturing people before they learn to meditate. And then we've been following their journey. So seeing whether there's any change from the meditation, but also showing how the town is changing and evolving along with the project.
Yeah, Baron, you're giving away our secrets. You're giving away our secrets because sometimes it's true. Like, you come in with an idea. I came in with an idea of things that I wanted to ask you. But you have to be able to pivot, and you get new information, and that's part of the fun, though, is you kind of go with it, and then you end up with something that's much more organic, that has the flow and has the feel, and then that's why our listeners come back, because they see the authenticity in the things that we talk about here. So as you're doing this, and you've identified, look, in this town in Nowra, there was a void. We didn't have this, and now you're educating people, you're working with people, you've brought something to the town, to the community that wasn't there before. We all have to eat. Are you doing this as a business in part as well? I mean, aside from the documentary?
Yeah. So what's interesting about Vedic meditation is that I'm an independent teacher of Vedic meditation, so there's no central Vedic organization. I just teach in the same way that my teacher taught me. And for me, it was really important to me that this would be available to everyone. Nowra is a lower socioeconomic place. And so I have a suggested course fee, which people can pay. And so the thing about the suggested course fee is I have suggestion, but I really want to meet people where they're at. And what that allows it to do is it allows people who can afford the full amount to pay and contribute towards the community project. And then the people who are, who can't afford it or are at a different financial stage of their life can still get the practice. And the beautiful thing about that, it's called Be Here Nowra Community Happiness Project, is that it is actually supported and funded by the community. And I don't have a high overheads. I've got a little studio. I live with my parents. Don't live a lavish lifestyle like I used to live in New York. And I'm happy, and it's great. And I feel like the support is there. Probably not going to buy a house anytime soon, but it's like we're building a community, and it's very fulfilling.
I'm getting the sense you really are happy. Like, so this isn't, really, I'm happy. I'm trying to convince you I'm happy. You're very happy, and you seem like that you've found where you need to be and where you want to be, and that you're fulfilling the idea of community in the work that you're doing. You have a special event. You mentioned when we first started talking, something's happening in October in Nowra. A festival of Vedic wisdom is happening. It's called Here in Nowra. Tell us more about the festival, what we're celebrating, who's coming, and what they will benefit from doing so.
Yeah, so as we talked about the research earlier, the Maharishi effect. So one of the challenges that I've been finding with, and I'm very close to teaching 1% of Nowra to meditate, but the problem is I can't guarantee that everybody's meditating every day, or people leave town, or people go on holidays. And so even if I get to that 1% number, it's hard to measure. And so what Maharishi used to do, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the person who the studies were named after, is he would import lots of meditators. So bring lots of conscious energy to a location and try to measure the effect. And so that was the whole impetus behind the Here in Nowra festival. And so I've invited all of my colleagues and all of their students and all of the Vedic meditation community from all over the world to descend on Nowra for a month of celebrations. And so we've got retreats, wisdom talks, workshops, social events, all of the reasons for people to come.
The other thing I want to say I admire too, on your BeHereNowra.com website, you have a little shopping area, and you've got some interesting tees and some cool sweaters. You've got a really cool me versus Chat GPT publishing there as well. So there are other ways that people can contribute and get something back just by enjoying some of these cool things in the shop. It's not a big shop, but it's really nice to see some of the unique things that you have there. Baron, I want to thank you for coming on the show, sharing your experiment, sharing your story, sharing something very personal that happened in your life and your very own transformation. Those are not easy things for everybody to do, especially on a stage where people are going to listen to you this month, next year, and several years from now even. So thank you for your courage to share your story with us. Before I let you go, is there anything else that you would like to leave us with?
I think, when I look at the world today, there's a lot of heat, there's a lot of stress. And I think the number one thing that we can do is to de-excite and rest. And we know that rest is the basis of action. And if we're not properly resting, we can't bring our full selves to the table. And so I would say, if there's one takeaway, is this to people to think about, how can we favor rest? How can we de-excite that nervous system so that we can come and give our full self? And so maybe people can think about that.
Helping us be here now, that is Baron Hansen sharing his meditation experiment and experience with us as he transitioned his life from New York to Nowra, Australia, where he continues to slowly master the art of living. He's helping others do the same through meditation and community as he invites you to learn more about his work and potentially about yourself. I'll have his links in the show notes. Thank you again, Baron. We wish you the best with your events. I hope that we do catch up with you again and get an update on the documentary and maybe even TIFF.
Toronto International Film Festival, here we come.
Well, I certainly hope that Baron reaches the 1% and more down in Nowra, Australia. That was such a fun segment and so much to learn from Baron. So again, we thank him for that. Look, I said this was going to be a packed episode. It's been a long time since I've had 3 guests and reviews all in one episode. And so we're right up against the wall. I typically have no more than 3 hours a month here on the show. But I also want to let you know that if you head on over to the video content over on the YouTube channel, you're going to hear and see more than what was in the segments here today, because we just have a little bit more space over there, and so you'll get even more information on a few of the segments that you heard here today. So if you just go to youtube.com/@themonthlysocial, you'll see that video content. Of course, happy to hear from you on any of the content on any of the shows. You can send me an email at guido@themonthlysocial.com. You're welcome to follow me on Facebook, which is facebook.com/themonthlySocialPodcast. On Instagram, it's instagram.com Guido Perino, all one word. What am I missing? There's lots of ways. Even go to guidoperino.com and you can find ways to follow us there. And of course, always themonthlysocial.com. Looking forward to next month, where right now the planned guest schedule is we're going Grand Funk with Mark Farner. We're going to have David Fish, who's going to talk about stage fright and public speaking as part of the self-help segment. And we're going to talk election, because there's a United States election happening. We're going to talk about the political homelessness and what that landscape looks like. But for now, have a safe and happy Halloween that's coming up at the end of October. And I look forward to catching up with you next month. Let's close out the show with a song from Rose Cora Perry and The Truth Untold. And of course, you can hear Rose on thepathradio.com. You can also go to her website, which we have in the show notes, on Spotify, on Apple Music, all over the place. So let's close out the October show with Rose Cora Perry and The Truth Untold with their hit, The Cure.
Burn the pages, turn off the TV. Haven't you heard? It's conspiracy. They said they were right on us, they keep eyes. How dare we question them? Turn the lights out.
Join us on the Path Radio Mix online, and you can get there by typing in the address thepathradio.com. That's thepathradio.com. You can listen to free online streaming music and other audio content all day long on thepathradio.com. All right, now let's get to the main show, the reason why you're here, and that is the Go On with Guido podcast. Hope you enjoy the show, folks.